can come all the way back, you'd bring up Tommy Edman. Driven toward left. He went down and combed that to left. Wynn's going to streak towards second. The throw's going to be late. And now we're in a spot where a single could tie the game. Mason Wynn's second double of the year.
Yeah, it's a big at bat to extend that inning. We're going to continue to see, the combination of what Winn and Walker did today, we're going to see a lot more of that.
Driven to right. Well hit. Tatis back. It is gone. It is gone. The Cardinals have won it.
Man, it's just nice to hear Chip Caray happy. You know, if there's one guy you feel bad for, it's Chip Caray for what he's had to go through this season with this Cardinals team.
I've had to go through it, too.
Well, I don't feel as bad for you. I feel bad for Chip Caray. We feel bad for BT, but not now, boys. The Cardinals are on a winning streak with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. They're on a winning streak so much, T-Bone, I put a Cardinal shirt on today.
Oh, did you?
Because I said the combination of Jordan Walker and Mason Winn, boy, they've put excitement back into Busch Stadium.
That is true. I wore a Cardinal shirt today, but I'm wearing Illinois State, so hopefully they're good.
Wrong Cardinals. Grant at least wore red, so we're on.
I got my Cardinals hat
on. Okay, so see, the three of us, well, 2.5 of us are back on board with this Cardinals team. But that, of course, was courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest from yesterday, where the Cardinals took down the Padres, walk-off fashion. Once again, Tommy Edman, the hero. You've won back-to-back games, but I don't even care about the winning as much as I care about the guys involved with it, and that's Walker and Winn. With the production, Walker yesterday going 4 for 4, home run, 3 RBIs, double, was a triple shy of the cycle. Boy, that would have got T-Bone more excited than just laying down the bunt like Palacio.
Can't beat the bunt.
And then you get Mason Winn. And the Mason Winn one was just as impressive, if not more impressive for me, for a guy in that position, bottom of the ninth, to lead things off and put him into scoring position with his speed. But the combination of those two, as you heard Ollie mention in that return, the combination of those two are starting to give Cardinals fans the ability to dream again. And throughout this season, I think it's been very difficult for a lot of Cardinals fans to get excited about the future of this Cardinals team. Sure, Walker was there. Sure, Gorman was there. But it was, well, these guys aren't the answer, and they got to figure it out, and they got to make some massive changes. Now you're looking at this team a little differently, and I know it's only 2 sample sizes, but we've seen Jordan Walker all season. Mason Winn, we've seen him dominate in the minors, T-Bone. Now you're getting to the point where you're saying, okay, you've got 2 young players that are going to be massive pieces for this team moving forward.
Yeah, and we all knew they're going to be that. It was just a matter of how quickly will they become that. And I think with Walker, there's a lot of great signs to see what next year holds for him. He is hitting for decent power with that home run 12 now on the year. He's 9% above league average, and he's only going to get better. Mason Winn, look, we knew his bat was going to struggle when it got up here. It was going to take him time to adjust. But to your point, yes, that at-bat yesterday against one of the best closers in baseball, if not the best closer in baseball, down 0-2 in the count, and you're willing to go down there and get that slider and chop that thing into left field, and not only just hit that ball into left, but take that extra base as well, which it didn't end up mattering because Edman hit the home run. But still, it puts you in scoring position in case it's not a home run for Tommy Edman and it is just a single. You have a chance to come around and score. So the fact that both those guys, Walker more so than Winn, but Winn did a great job to keep that game alive yesterday, taking over a game really for the first time this year, where you looked at Walker and went, wow, 4 for 4. As you mentioned, the 3 RBIs, the double, the home run. That was the first game in which we've seen Walker really just say, all right, get on my back. I'm going to carry us to the finish line. He tied the game at 3, does a great job throughout the day, and then Winn coming through. Like, you can start to see why the Cardinals front office was so kind of excited about both of these players. And I think for Winn, it doesn't so much matter to the bat. Like, whatever you get out of the bat is a plus for this year and probably, honestly, even next year. But his defense has been great. It's been as advertised. His base running ability, the speed has been as advertised. And one guy that we haven't even thrown in this, and it's because you didn't even see him, like Nolan Gorman having a great second year too. Like that, those 3 are the next big 3 here in St. Louis for the Cardinals moving forward.
The next MV3?
Well,
okay.
Sorry, Winn, but I don't know.
Maybe not. But look, our good old Air Comfort Service text line at 314-399-9646. By the way, you can also check us out on YouTube, our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN SDL. But they're keeping me honest, T-Bone. They're making sure that I'm not a hypocrite on these airwaves from the 314. Ferrario, weren't you just talking about this lifeless offense 2 days ago? I was. And the offense, although still inconsistent for my liking, I'm more optimistic about it because, and I texted you last night about this, I feel like there's a clutchness ability that is needed in this Cardinals team. And I know you've got Arenado and Goldschmidt who seem to always come up with those big hits for this team, but those secondary pieces that can come up with the big hits, the big plays, that the moment isn't too big for them. I think you're starting to see that with Jordan Walker and Mason Winn, and I think that is necessary for this Cardinals team to have younger players who have that ability. So, yeah, I can talk about this offense being lifeless, and I can talk about it being inconsistent, but on the same side of my mouth, I can talk about the young players that were a part of the inconsistency this season that also have shown signs of, I don't want to say greatness, but signs of ability to win games for the Cardinals in big moments, which in the last few seasons, which I've been critical of, they have not had those guys. Yeah,
I don't read too much into the runner and scoring position thing yet for both Walker and Winn because it is so early on in their career. And like we've talked about this, this year for the Cardinals with runners in scoring position and mostly with the bases loaded where they're just awful at it. I think part of that is luck. I don't think it's so much approach anything like that for St. Louis. I think it's just an odd year for the Cardinals when it comes to runners in scoring position. But with Walker and Winn, it is encouraging to see these guys really starting to develop. I do think Winn has looked better at the plate recently. He seems more comfortable.
And he told us that. He said, he's like, I'm a slow getter out of the gate whatever league I'm in, but after I get comfortable, that's when I start to have success.
And with Walker, I mean, Ollie said it post-game yesterday, he's starting to lay off the slider a little bit more, which is a good sign to see. Like, you're seeing those slow progressions or these slow developments from these players and learning at the big league level. And remember, that's why I was so high on Nolan Gorman coming into this year. You saw him make adjustments at the big league level. Now you're seeing that from Walker and Winn. And I also love, too, just the kind of to your point on clutchness. They bring just a different level of energy to the ballpark.
Jordan Walker in the dugout yesterday when Mason Winn got on base in the bottom of the ninth, that's the most excited I have seen that young kid all season long.
Yes, and I think because those two are so close, which they've talked about ad nauseum, those guys being like best friends, bringing that kind of energy, and this is without Nootbaar. Nootbaar's not even on the field yet. Now you're starting to feel kind of that, I don't want to say like Tampa Bay Rays vibe where you get all that excitement around that team.
Yeah.
You got guys with like energy like Randy Arozarena, but it's not going to feel as lifeless, and it really won't feel that way if you are playing meaningful baseball next year at this time. But I do love what they bring to the field, not just their abilities, but also just kind of that excitement level that they seem to be bringing right now in a point in which, yes, to the text line's point, 2 days ago, we were all three of us were heavily criticizing, saying they looked lifeless.
Yeah.
They needed those 2 wins, even though it doesn't mean anything in the long run for them. They just needed those just to put some good vibes back into the clubhouse.
It's hard to see the sun through the storm right now, but those guys are giving you that ability. And look, the other guy that at least made you feel better about where he's at is Miles Mikolas with his performance yesterday. We talked about him on our rewind before we ended our show about how concerned we should be with Miles Mikolas because he's been getting hit around a lot and he's not looking like that number 3 that you're projecting him to be. So with his early struggles so far in August, and really with yesterday, he finished the line yesterday with 6 innings pitched, 7 hits, 3 earned runs, 2 walks, and 2 strikeouts. So although Miles has been letting guys on base and giving up more hits, found his way through that to get a quality start. So I'd still say the concern level is there. You don't want to just sit there and act like Miles Mikolas is a number 3. But if there's one thing he's shown you, it's the ability to get out of jams multiple times this season.
Yeah, and again, it's going to depend on his finish to the season. He's probably got like 5 more starts, I'd say, is probably how many more he's got to go. But yesterday was... I'm glad to see he was able to bounce back from that second inning where he gave up the 3 runs, because I remember, I think it was during the rewind, he just got through that second inning. We had the conversation around him of, man, what's going on with Mikolas? He didn't have his best stuff, but he was able to find a way through it, and I'm curious to see what he looks like down the stretch because, and I said this yesterday, and I stand by it, he needs to be everything changes in the offseason if he can't be viewed as the 3.
Yeah.
If he struggles in the final 5 starts of the year and his ERA gets bloated even more, which is 4.66 right now, it changes the whole outlook for the offseason. Because you can get like a number 4 starter and you can kind of make that guy bounce back candidate if you want, or like if you view Matz as the number 5 could be that guy. But you don't want to do that for your 3. Your 3 needs to be like somewhat of a version of what Freddie Peralta is for the Brewers. Where, yes, he's got swing and miss, but it's pretty clear he's a solid number 3 pitcher for you. If you have any questions about Michaelis being that for you going into the offseason, the whole outlook for the offseason changes because you're signing 3 guys to the top 3 spots in your rotation, and number 3 starters get paid pretty handsomely still on the market. Number 4s, number 5s, when you go out there, those guys are looking at 1-2-year deals. Maybe there's an option involved, and it doesn't cost you probably more than $10 million. You start creeping into that 3 range, you're talking about that $10 to $15 million range in potentially 3 years.
We're going to be talking about that rotation a little bit later on with the show. He's Tanner Hendrickson. Grant Francis with us today. No BK. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, Curb said something yesterday with us on our show about guys taking the opportunity and running with it. Do they have better options this year for those players than what they did last year? We'll discuss that next, coming up on 101 ESPN.
You know, the Blues are going into this season with the same exact question that they had last season. And that was even when you still had O'Reilly and you still had Barbashev and you still had Tarasenko. And that's who's going to play on the left wing in either your first or your second line consistently. And they auditioned everybody there last year, and nobody really stepped up, took it, grabbed it, and ran with it. So that's a storyline to watch.
So that's one question that Curbs kind of sparked my interest yesterday on BK and Ferrario. And alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. The internal competition is always a topic going into training camp at the start of the season for hockey teams, right? It's for every team. We do it at spring training, and we wonder what the internal competitions look like. And the cliche saying is going to be, well, that's going to be good for this team.
Yeah, and Tanner typically predicts what actually happens, and you guys laugh because I predicted Mater to be on the opening day roster. But, it's a whole cycle.
Alex also predicts things that are going to happen, like Logan Brown being a top 9 player, and that doesn't work out. But what Curb said there, I believe they're in a better position this year with those internal guys trying to take a spot better than what they were last year. Because think about those guys last season. Logan Brown was one of the internal options that was competing to take one of those spots. Jake Neighbors was one of those guys. Yeah, he's in the same position now, but you got a second year underneath him. But then go through the rest of those guys that were competing. You had Alexei Toropchenko. You had Josh Levo. You had Nathan Walker, Nikita Alexandrov, Tyler Pitlick. Those were the guys competing to take over a third or a fourth line job. This season, to me, is much different. Your top 6 is pretty much set. You got your top 9, which you could argue put some guys there, a Brandon Saad, a Jake Neighbors, Verana, Kapanen. But look at the other guys that are competing. Sammy Blais could be a top 9 player for this team, probably going to be a fourth line player. Alexei Toropchenko still. Now you've got Oscar Sundqvist. You brought back Mackenzie McEachran. You've got those younger players in Nikita Alexandrov and Zachary Dean. All of these guys, to me, are better options than what you had last season. I mean, guys, we were trying to convince ourselves that Nathan Walker could be an 82-game player on the fourth line. Nathan Walker might have to fight for a roster spot this season, which is better than where they were last year because you have more competent players fighting for roster positions than what you did.
So I don't disagree with you on the fourth line, and that I do think they are deeper, and I think they've got more certainty in terms of what they are looking for in that fourth line. Because the biggest thing with the fourth line, since the Cup run maybe, is that you just didn't know what you were going to get from the fourth line.
Yeah.
It was, okay, we're going to throw 3 guys out there, and then Bruby's going to call them right back to the bench, and they're going to sit there most of the game.
Yeah, really, when Steen was gone, that's what you were doing.
Because they never really trusted everybody on that line. They maybe trusted one player like Toropchenko, I think, earned the trust of the coaching staff, but they never got it from all 3 guys on that line. And they could get to that point this year with Alexandrov, Toropchenko, Blais, potentially, Sundqvist, all those guys. The one spot that I think they're going to still potentially have the same kind of, if you want to call it, issue or the same question for the whole season is the top 6 getting solidified. And what I mean by that is I think with Thomas, Kyrou, those guys are going to be on that top line. Hayes or Shen, whoever ends up centering that second line, you know what you're going to get out of those guys.
You're in a good position for the centerman no matter what.
Yeah, and you know what you're going to get out of Booch if he's healthy, if he can stay healthy. So, those 4, it's the wing on the other side that is the question mark. Like, I'm looking at Cap Friendly right now just to see what they have as the line projections, and they've got Saad on the top line, and they've got Kapanen on the second line.
I don't think that's going to happen. I believe the Blues know that they're best suited to have Brandon Saad as a third-line player.
I agree, but here's where my point is on this in terms of where I think there is potential for the same issue that arose last year is, yes, I liked what we saw from Kapanen last year. I liked what we saw from Vrana last year when they were here. But that was just a short stint, and both those guys fell out of favor in their previous locations for different reasons. But those are the kind of players that I look at and I go, okay, Vrana, his ceiling is a legitimate top goal scorer for the St. Louis Blues. His floor isn't like a mid-level floor for most players. It is like, hey, this guy's not going to be playing defense. He's not scoring a ton of goals, and you're trying to he's probably on the third line for you. I think they could run into the same inconsistency issues they had last year in the top 6 at that wing spot, where it is, okay, in theory, Kapanen is that guy, or Verana is that goal scorer that goes on that line. But because it could be too inconsistent, you start to get to that shuffle that the Blues did last year, where they start throwing Levo up onto that top line to play with Ryan O'Reilly. Or where, to the point of what you said, I agree, the best thing for the Blues is Saad is on the third line on that wing. But if Vrana's inconsistent or Kapanen's inconsistent and you have to start bumping him up, you start running into some of the same issues that you had last year,
but don't you feel better?
Guys out of position on the top line.
But don't you feel better about this team now not trying to force a Logan Brown into a top 6 role or a Levo into a top 6 role when you know you've got Sammy Blais that can do that, where you've seen Oscar Sundqvist do that? You've got guys who have track records playing in that position rather than last year as you were just hoping that they could be something for that position.
Do I feel better about Blais and Sonny over like Logan Brown? I mean, absolutely. Like, Logan Brown was just not good last year. But, I mean, we're basically squinting and saying, okay, Blais, really a fourth liner, and can we bump him up into the top 6? Okay, yeah, Sundqvist is a fourth liner. Can I squint and see him playing in the top 6? I mean, sure, but that doesn't feel like a good thing. Like, if we have to say, well, you have Sammy Blais that could play in your top 6, well, then I think you have some serious question marks. And that's not a shot against Sammy Blais. Like, he was great last year. But I don't know if I want him outside on the second or first line for extended periods. Same with Oscar Sundqvist. Really good player if he's healthy. I don't know if I really want him on the first or second line to try and help create offense if it's too inconsistent. And that's kind of my point is, do I think that will they be as inconsistent and have issues where they had to put Levo on the top line with Ryan O'Reilly last year? I don't know if it's going to be that bad. But I can see where Vrana doesn't end up panning out on the top line, and maybe Kapanen goes through struggles on that second line or even on the first line, to where then they start doing what I'm talking about, and they have to bump Saad back up to the first line, or to your point, have to start moving Blais up to the lineup to where, can he do it? Sure, but I don't know if I want him doing it in big spurts, if that makes sense.
I feel where the Blues are right now, talking about Blais and Sundqvist, like the Blues need to get back to having players play in the spots where they belong. For example, I've said this before, Brandon Saad should not be on your top line. He's a third-line player. We were just talking about that. The same goes for Blais and Sundqvist. They're going to succeed in the places that are most natural for them, which I believe is the fourth line. And as you were saying, can Blais play up? Sure. But he's going to have the most success on a fourth line. And by the way, if you have Blais on your fourth line, if he's scoring at the rate that he was last year, then all of a sudden you have 4 deep lines that can score anytime during a game. So I think that's the biggest thing, is the Blues need to get to the spot where they can have players playing in their most natural spots. And there are players like Jake Neighbors who can jump into a bigger role this season. If he can take a top 6 role on this team, then everything starts to fill out. It's the domino effect. So it comes down to someone needs to sort of take the keys. Like if Jake Neighbors can take that second line left wing spot, then everything sort of falls into place. But if nobody's able to really take that spot and claim it, then yeah, there's going to be question marks all through the lineup.
Absolutely.
That's what goes into a rebuilding team.
And that's the question that BK asked Curbs yesterday. And we don't need to play the audio, but BK said, is that the best case scenario for this Blues team is Jake Neighbors takes a top 6 role? And he said, absolutely. And he's right. He's spot on. If Jake Neighbors outperforms Kapanen and Saad and Vrana in camp, well, now you've just created depth, because if Neighbors looks like a legit top 6 winger who can create space and go to the front of the net, now you've got Vrana and Kapanen and Saad, 2 of those 3 playing on a third line, who should both be top 6 wingers. And now you're talking Blais on the fourth line. And this is where the depth comes into play, which is why I'm optimistic about the offense, but it doesn't matter unless you have guys that are saying, okay, and this is the difference, again, of what last year was to this year. 3 guys that you projected to be in your top 6, which were Barbashev, Tarasenko, and O'Reilly, maybe Barbashev top 9. Those 3 guys didn't have the motivation that Vrana and Kapanen have, because they didn't get contract extensions. Vrana and Kapanen don't expect contract extensions. They've got to prove it. Those 3 guys all expected to get something. Maybe 2, you could argue Tarasenko didn't. That's the difference. Those 3 guys didn't have that same motivation that these 2 players have.
And that's what I find so interesting about the Blues, is because their ceiling, I don't know if it's like Stanley Cup contender type ceiling, but
it's not everyone.
It's definitely a playoff caliber team is their ceiling. And like, there's no denying it. The Blues would want to be in the playoffs this year. And in fact, we would love for them to be in the playoffs this year.
I desperately need them to be in the playoffs.
I miss Blues playoff hockey.
Yes. I just miss playoffs.
But what's so interesting about them is this question that we're raising is, all it takes is that one domino to fall where things get a little bit tougher for the St. Louis Blues.
Absolutely.
And it's in this top 6. And that's why they are going to be one of the most fascinating teams, I think, in the NHL early on, because their ceiling is they could play really well. Everything comes together. And to your point, Jake Neighbors takes that and runs and becomes a top 6 winger, which is probably the best case for this team. and we're talking playoffs around trade deadline time. But if one domino falls, Neighbor doesn't take it, and Kapanen is too inconsistent on that second line or the first line, or Vrana's the same way, all of a sudden we're talking about a team that's probably looking like sellers again at the deadline, and that's what makes them so fascinating this year.
Let me ask you guys this. Is it out of the question for this team that scored 260 goals last season? Is it out of the question for them to score 300 goals this year as a team?
I don't think that's out of the question.
So you had 260 last year with that roster. Now you have Sundqvist, Blais, Vrana, Kapanen for a full season. 40 more goals for those with those 4 players. Because if you do, then you're the exact same offense that you were the year that you made it to the second round against Colorado, because that team scored 309 goals and was top 5 in the NHL in total goals scored. So if you think that this team can score 40 more goals than what they did last year with this roster, we're talking about the exact same team.
So let me kind of run through this just real quick. Like, we're going to do math on air, so everybody be prepared.
And we know how that goes.
O'Reilly had 12 goals. Let's say Hayes scores. What do you have last
Hayes is
year?
going to give you 12 to 20.
I would be surprised if he didn't.
So that's +8 in that spot. Vrana, if he adds, let's say he scores, I'm going to go a little bit lenient here, not go super high. Let's say he scores 25. So that's another 15.
I was going to say that's 14 or 15 more than what Vladdy scored for the Blues.
So that ends up adding more
23.
to your. I mean, I don't think they'll get that high in terms of what you said offensively. Like 40 goals sounds like a lot that they're adding.
300 goals is, so just to put this into perspective, last year there were 2 teams that scored more than 300 goals. It was Boston and Edmonton.
Well, and in the year before that for the Blues, when they made it to the second round against Colorado, they scored 311 that year. I just looked that up.
311?
So it does seem sort of steep to go the 300 route, because you had players that were playing out of their minds that season for the Blues.
How many did they give up last year?
Last year,
301.
Yeah, they might do that again.
How the hell did you know? 298, sir.
Are you sure? Oh, sorry.
Jeez. This
All right,
guy's
well-
just trying to add 3 goals to it. It was
Well,
still a
that is
it was still a
possible.
minus
It was
38.
301, by the way. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, they could give up 301 again
Either
next
way.
year.
Yeah, regardless. That's going to be the difference with this. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. One team that we get to start being optimistic about, that's right, Tanner, I'm including you in this, is our home Tigers. MIZ, boys, they start tonight. What are realistic expectations? We'll get to that next on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Yesterday, the Cardinals walked off the Padres for the second day in a row. They take the series against San Diego 2-1, and they'll be off today, back out at tomorrow for a 3-game set against the Pirates. Last night as well, City SC 2-1 winners over FC Dallas. City SC is now 15-9-2 on the season. They'll be back in action on Saturday in Kansas City to take on Sporting KC, who they beat earlier in the year 4-0. KC is 7-11-8 on the season. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports and Update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
I think he's done a remarkable job with recruiting. He's done an outstanding job. He might be one of the better recruiters that Mizzou has had from a head football coach standpoint. The problem is he hasn't done enough winning. You show improvement not through your recruiting classes, although that's part of the process, but you show improvement by winning games on Saturday nights and the occasional Thursdays. So when it comes to Drink, you gotta. I think you gotta win at least eight games this year.
Anthony Stalter yesterday on the fast lane, and he must be in my head, because that's where I stand also. With Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. BK's not here, so now we can be honest about it. We can be negative. We don't have to be the optimistic, happy people.
They're going to lose tonight.
Oh, God, if they lose tonight, oh, man.
You weren't thinking that?
Friday is going to be a rough show for our Missouri Tigers.
What I see is a gold mine of content.
That's
they
true.
might fire the coach.
He's not here. Yeah, Eli might not be here. That's a gold mine of an entire show. But look, Stoltz is absolutely correct. If you're Eli Drinkwitz, you've already nailed the recruiting side of things. You're recruiting top 5 recruits. You're doing something that hasn't been done in a really long time with the Missouri Tigers. But you also have to back it up with winning. And the last few years, the first year you saw the optimism, 5-5, you were all in conference play, and you're thinking, okay, Drink might have something here. He's coming off of his record where he was Appalachian. I always butcher that. Yeah. One of the two. Where he came from over there, success, 5-5.
But
Appalachian, I don't know, I've heard both. Then you go to the next year where you finish 6-7, but the conference play takes a dip. You're 3-5. And then the following year, you're the exact same team. That's where you have to improve. And the expectations for the Missouri Tigers, we've talked about this. For me and BK, it's 7 or 8 wins. 8 is optimistic. 7 is probably more realistic with this team. That shows improvement. But if you go 6-7 again, if you go 2 games or worse under 500 against conference play, then I can't sit here and act like, oh, well, you're great at recruiting if you're not backing it up on the field. And that's where this season is pretty massive for Drink. Maybe I believe he's more on a hot seat than somebody else. But when you're going up against this type of schedule where we've located the 3 or 4 games in conference play that are going to be basically impossible for them to win. But the rest of that shows that this team can win 7 or 8 games, which is showing improvement for Eli Drinkwitz.
Yeah, I think he's got to get to 7 wins this year. I think 6, his job is probably safe still, I would say. It's a disappointing year. Then the seat really warms up. I think anything below 500, he probably is out the door. But I don't think they're at that level. I think they are going to be a 500 team, and I think they can win 7, maybe 8 games this year. I think they've got a couple on their schedule like LSU, Georgia, Tennessee. Those 3 I think you can write off as more than likely losses. Kansas State's going to be interesting. Memphis is interesting. They've got Vanderbilt. They should win that one. And then there's a couple of toss-up games. And he's going to have to show that they can win some of those
toss-up games are going to be the judging ones.
The toss-up games are what hurt Mizzou last year. They like that Auburn game. They should have won that Auburn game last year. I'm not going to say they should have won, but they were right in it with number 1 Georgia.
Yeah.
They lost by 7 to Florida on the road. They lost at home to Kentucky by 4. Like, they had a couple of toss-up games that if 1 or 2 of those go a different direction, we're even putting more of the more pressure on Mizzou to take the next step forward because they could have been a 7 or 8 win team last year. So I think the pressure is on to get to 7 wins. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. You know, Eli dropped the play calling this year. He hired an OC, so I'm fascinated to see what that looks like tonight and how that just kind of progresses as the season goes on. But it is time. Like year 4, I think every college coach should get probably a 3-4 year kind of grace period because you take over year 1, and he had it even tougher.
Oh, yeah.
Where it was take over in a pandemic year, everything was kind of up
with
in the air.
a rough roster carried over.
Exactly. And that first year is typically, okay, I got to try and figure out, somehow I've got to win with a roster that I didn't build, plus I've got to sell to recruits, hey, come to Missouri. By year 4, which we're in now in the Eli Drinkwitz experience, he's done a great job. I think Stoltz is right on, and you said it too. He's done a great job in recruiting.
Yeah.
Now it's all about trying to turn those recruits into winning football players and winning games at the University of Missouri.
Yeah, 7 wins is what you're looking at. And look, tomorrow when we come on the air after what you expect to be a Mizzou win over South Dakota, you're going to sit there, and of course the first caveat we're going to say is, look, it was against South Dakota. But if there's certain areas that you were watching for in this game tonight against South Dakota for Mizzou, mine's all about offense. BK has been preaching how this defense is going to be significantly better than what it was last year, and it was a good defense last year. Now you're getting better. That's what BK believes. That's great. If they go out there and shut down South Dakota, fine. What's the offense look like? Because a couple of things. One, you mentioned it, T-Bone. You dropped your offensive coordinator duties as Drinkwitz and gave it to somebody else. So now you can focus on head coaching. Somebody can focus on offense. What does that translate to the game plan, and how does your quarterback look? Because people have gone back and forth. Brady Cook, Sam Horn. What are you going to look like with this? Your outcome this season, to me, is going to rely on how this offense looks if they can take that dynamic step forward.
So there are 3 things that I'm looking for in tonight's game. Man, we should have done a T-Bone 3.
Oh, man, I got 5.
One was the quarterback battle, because you're going to see both Sam Horn and you're going to see Brady Cook tonight. They're going to split this game. My guess is you're probably going to see Brady Cook first and then Sam Horn. I mean, this is as you said, this is not only should we be going on the air tomorrow talking about a win, it should be a blowout, and it should be basically Mizzou picked the score that they wanted it to be. This thing's anywhere close or anything within like 21 to 28 points, there probably is a little bit of concern that we'll be talking about tomorrow. But I am curious to see what both those quarterbacks look like, if one of them can kind of help already start to separate themselves going into next week's matchup against Middle Tennessee. The other thing I'm going to be looking for, because I'm not going to be looking at the offense as a whole, because I think there's a chance that sometimes in games like this, Kirby Moore is going to hide some of his actual, I don't want to say his actual plays, but some of his best stuff for when they get to like a Memphis game or when they start getting into conference play, because you don't want to put everything out here on the table to beat an FCS program in South Dakota. So I'm not looking at the offense as a whole that way. I am fascinated to see what Luther Burden looks like tonight, see if he's gotten better. I mean, BK is right on when he said this. Though his season was a tough season last year, it wasn't all on Drink. Some of that was on Luther Burden. And he was learning to play at the SEC. So I'm fascinated to see what he looks like, and I'm fascinated to see what the defense looks like tonight. Because if it's as good as advertised, and BK has been telling me that it could be like what Illinois' defense was last year, they're going to be flying around tonight, and you're going to get a good sense of what they could potentially be. So I'm fascinated to see those 3 things going into tonight's game against South Dakota.
I think I really am fascinated, though, of what the offense looks like with an offensive coordinator. Because, I mean, we haven't seen that for a Mizzou team in, since Barry Odom? Drink took over, it's all been his offense. Now you're putting somebody in charge of that.
I just don't know what all we're going to see. Maybe I'll come on the air tomorrow and say, wow, the game that Kirby Moore called was great. But it's just tough for me to anticipate that tonight going up against an FCS school.
Right. This could just be a ground and pound type of game for this Mizzou team.
Sorry, South Dakota. Great state. We've been there once.
Never been
This
there.
is like a preseason
Mount Rushmore's
game.
There, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
See, I know my geography. I took geography in high school.
This is like a preseason game. You never see NFL teams go, all right, we're going to run our best trick play here.
What are you talking about,
Imagine
though?
the Eagles running the Philly special in week 1 of the preseason.
Every preseason game we ever see, whether it's Cardinals in spring training, Blues in action, we say, oh, my God, this team's going to win it all.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily. Yeah.
By the way, ESPN Analytics has this like 96% that Mizzou wins. Frankly, I'm surprised it's not 99%, but they know Mizzou's in action, so you always have to anticipate the worst in this. One more piece I wanted to ask, and you showed this to us yesterday, T-Bone, because Utah, that's the big game tonight. They're taking on Florida. Utah, of course, is ranked, 14th going into the season, but they don't have their quarterback, and they don't have potentially their tight end in this game. Are we going to see an upset in week 1 or week 0?
I still think Utah's going to win this game.
The DraftKings app has them as a -5 favorite. And Tebow, you asked the question, what was that yesterday? Because that had to have been like a -9.5 yesterday.
Yeah, I bet they were heavily favored going into yesterday, or before the news was announced that he's going to be missing this game. But I still believe that Utah's going to win this game, but I do think it's going to be a lot closer than I originally thought. Now that they are missing their QB, without Rising, it just becomes a much tougher task for Utah. But it's more so not so much I'm high on Utah and their backup quarterback as I am low on Florida. So I think this will be interesting. I think it's got the potential for an upset, but I would still say take the Utes to win this one tonight.
I'm just happy college football is back.
No kidding.
I had to watch Notre Dame last Saturday, and again, it was against Navy, but it was still exciting.
Navy completes that one pass they attempted. They're in that football game. It's a different story.
Didn't they get smashed by 40-something points?
Yeah, but they lost all the momentum when two guys ran into each other and they were wide open.
That's college football season for you. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Our Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. Also, our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Our questions and answers segment is next, so send your questions our way. We'll answer them on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646. That is our Air Comfort Service text line alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. As you send your questions over to us, you can also send them on YouTube, our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Let's start off with this one. Fellas, City, another victory last night. What's the excitement level at for all of you?
I mean, pretty high because...
Has it even changed? Like, I just feel like the excitement level's always there. Even when they lose, people are still like, oh, the city teams. Like, it always seems to be at its highest.
I think one thing that was great about last night's win for them, that was a weird game. The fact that the goalie for FC Dallas got sent off on a red card 12 minutes in.
A red card, like, right away.
Yeah. I've seen that happen, but, man, it is so rare that occurs.
Those refs came off in a sour mood, I guess.
But the thing that was encouraging about the win last night was I never was doubting like Lutz and Carnell and the work that they've done, because the fact that they've built this incredible machine that is an expansion team in the first year and is atop of the Western Conference. But both these guys that scored last night were acquired in season for City. Markinovich, I think I said that right. I can't remember.
Probably not, but good try.
They acquired him from Colorado earlier this season in a trade. Thorson, who they got on the... Thor, they got on the transfer market earlier this year. Like, he brought both those pieces in, and then they scored yesterday. And they didn't even play Giacchini last night because they're kind of resting some guys since they were playing from Saturday to Wednesday, and they got to play this weekend too. So it made sense that some of those guys were out. But man, I mean, he brought in more depth pieces that were contributing last night, and they're going to need that depth to come through if they're going to end up going on that run, if they want to win the Cup or win the MLS championship this year. And last night just continued to add my faith in that. I still think the back line is a little bit thin, but I think they're going to get better the more comfortable they get, and Nielsen's will be back in the lineup again probably this weekend. I tell you what, man, like after last night's game, I felt good about their chances. I felt even better after last night's win.
Yeah, for me, it doesn't change. Like, I think the elements that you know about this team are there. And even if they lose, you know that Roman Berkey is one of the best, if not the best goalie in MLS. Goalkeeper. Sorry if I mispronounced that, Grant. I know you hold me accountable there.
Arcanic. I knew I was wrong.
And the offense. Your offense is the best in MLS. And those are the two elements I know about this team. So when their offense goes silent one game and it's a close one because you've got Berkey playing out of his mind, that's their path to success. So I love the excitement around it, but to me, it's just always at like a 9 or a 10 in terms of expectations, because that's what City has done this season.
Is it championship or bust for them this year?
I believe so, which seems weird to say for an expansion team, but you've got the best goalkeeper and your offense is the best. I don't know how it shouldn't be.
I think I kind of agree, and it does feel a little bit too harsh to be putting that on an expansion team.
Pepper this team if they don't win it.
No, but I think it would be fair, like if they got bounced in the first round, for example, which hopefully doesn't happen.
So
but to say that's a disappointing year.
I'm going to be like, what went wrong and how do we reset?
It feels so weird to be putting those expectations on an expansion team, but again, they continue to just dominate the Western Conference.
That's what we did with Vegas their first year in the NHL. Like, they came out as a dominant team, and you said, well, they're going to win the Cup this year. And look how far they went. Nobody butchered them because they didn't win it, but the fact that you got there, that reminds me a lot of this City team.
I will say, like, I'm very excited about the team, but the one concern I do have is when they go up against quality opponents, they do tend to struggle. Like, Orlando was a good opponent. They lost 2-1. Club America, obviously, but Columbus was able to beat them. They lost to Columbus 2-1. They beat Inter Miami. They're bad. They were before Messi. Lost to LAFC. They beat Toronto, who's one of the worst teams. Colorado's bad. They beat them. But like, then when they go up against teams like Orlando, they tend to struggle. And, you know, their next two matches, Sporting KC, LA Galaxy, two bad clubs. But then you got Houston and LAFC in mid-September. That's where I'm really going to be paying attention, because those are two tough teams. And if St. Louis can walk out of those games, those matches,
unbelievable,
with a couple wins,
call yourself a soccer guy,
that's when my excitement will really ramp up.
From the 636 Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. Guys, who is your sleeper pick for NFL MVP this season? I don't know if it's a sleeper pick, but I would say Lamar Jackson. And I mean, if you look at the odds, it's considered an underdog because he's not a favorite, but I don't really know if there's a sleeper pick that's going to be able to pull out with the MVP this season. So Lamar Jackson would probably be my answer.
Yeah, Lamar's a good one, and I think he would be considered a sleeper, even though he's considered one of the top
Just because
quarterbacks
you're
in the
going up
AFC.
against Allen and Mahomes and Burrow.
Yeah,
And Hurts.
one for me, and it's in the NFC, it is Dak. That offense should be great for Dallas. They added Brandon Cooks. You've already got CeeDee Lamb. You got Tony Pollard that's going to be taking the bulk of the carries now in the backfield. And he can catch the ball too.
And your offensive line, if it stays healthy, is one of the best.
Your offensive line is one of the best if it stays healthy. I could see where Dak puts up incredible numbers this year to where, what was it last year? Through week 8, we were kind of talking about, whoa, if you squint, Kirk Cousins is kind of in this conversation. I could see where he kind of does that. I'm not saying I would put my money on that, but if you want a sleeper, I think Dak's an interesting case.
And I guarantee his odds are incredible too. Grant?
I think Aaron Rodgers is interesting. If the Jets have the season that a lot of people are
He's absolutely
hyping
a
up
sleeper too, though, because of how last year went.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm looking at he's a plus 1,600 to win the MVP, and Trevor Lawrence is as well. So is Lamar Jackson, actually. So all those three plus 1,600, but I do like Aaron Rodgers for that.
So pissed off I didn't get Lamar Jackson in our fantasy football draft.
Sam Darnold plus 10,000.
Somebody
What
puts
if Brock Purdy doesn't work out?
If somebody puts money on Sam Darnold, just send me the money. I'll give you my Venmo. It'll be easier. Final one from the 314. Guys, I'm not sure if you saw this, but Phil Kessel wants to play hockey this season and said he's willing to not keep his Ironman streak going. Would you take a flyer on him? Absolutely not. Phil Kessel has won championships. Phil Kessel is a goal scorer. Phil Kessel is a fringe player now. He's goal scoring or bust. And frankly, Phil Kessel comes here and he's on a fourth line. And does Phil Kessel match the identity of a fourth line for any of you guys? Not so much me. So, no, I would not take a flyer on him. No chance.
I would not either. One, you don't need him, and that's my only reason for it. You just don't need a Phil Kessel right now.
I would much rather see Nikita Alexandrov get an opportunity on a fourth line than throw Phil Kessel out there.
I was just about to say, if you bring in Phil Kessel, you're just costing opportunities from every other player that's trying to break through on this team.
Right. I don't think there's anybody, because I know this is the PTO conversation. Everyone's like, oh, is there anybody to get a PTO? I don't think there's anybody out there worth a PTO for this Blues team right now. I think your roster is in place, and you just go into training camp and you see what happens. Now, if injuries take place or if guys don't look well and there's still somebody sitting out there, sure, go ahead. But for right now, what you see right now on the Blues website of their roster is the roster that should be going into training camp, and I don't expect any other changes. Tanner Hendrickson, Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, Stoltz said something yesterday very interesting in comparing the Cardinals and the Braves. And surprisingly, both T-Bone and I disagree. We'll discuss that next here on 101 ESPN.
You look at the Braves lineup, they're loaded. They can beat you in a multitude of ways, like this one exec was talking about. They also have guys that go to the post every single day. They know what their lineup is. They have stayed relatively healthy. They've had a bunch of guys on the IL throughout the course of the year, but it's been more pitchers than hitters. What they built is incredibly impressive. And if we localize it and say, how did the Cardinals create a roster like the Braves? You're nowhere close. You're not in the same hemisphere as what the Braves are. And you have to stop mixing and matching like the Rays and Giants do. The Braves don't mix and match anything. They got the same 9 guys. Yeah, but relatively speaking.
That's Anthony Stalter from the Fast Lane yesterday. If you missed any of that or anything on our podcast page, you can go check it out, 101ESPN.com, which is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Staltz is probably like a lot of Cardinals fans right now that say the Cardinals are night and day far away, not even in the same hemisphere as the Atlanta Braves because of the platoon guys, because of having guys that don't really have positions. And T-Bone and I both look at that a little differently, and we might be in the minority in this. And frankly, I believe we are in the minority in this, T-Bone, because I still believe the Braves are significantly better than the Cardinals, and they've got some work to do if you want to catch them. But I don't think it's that far of a difference in terms of having everyday players. And a lot of that has changed now because of Mason Winn. A lot of that doesn't look that way right now, also because of the injuries that are taking place of certain guys that are in and out of the lineup because of nagging back problems, ankle problems, whatever that might be. Knees, turf, who knows? That's the situation you're in of a bad team that's not making the playoffs. You have to be cautious with these guys. But if you look at the beginning of next season, again, the skill set from these players aren't right there with the Braves. But everyday positions seem to be locked down. Whether it's Contreras or Kisner, you've got your everyday catcher. Third base, shortstop, second base, and first base seem to have those positions locked in. Now, I can hear the argument of, is Nolan Gorman a second baseman? Or are you going to platoon him against lefties? I think the injuries are taking place with Gorman right now to the point that they're being cautious rather than, we just can't hit lefties. Your outfield is the biggest question mark, but Jordan Walker is going to be there. Lars Nootbaar is going to be there. And it sure seems, we'll talk about this a little bit later, Tommy Edman is there. So you've got your everyday players. It doesn't really seem like you have the platoon options anymore that people are talking about. That was the beginning of the season. Now it's solidified itself much more.
Yeah, I think the Cardinals have a everyday starting 9. Where they hit in the order can change and fluctuate based on matchups, but I don't think that should be like a major thing that we would freak out about. That's what smart teams do. They put their better hitters closer to the top of the order, and it's okay if that means Nootbaar goes from hitting leadoff to hitting ninth against a lefty. That's just good baseball sense. But I do think they have most of the starting 9 figured out. The DH spot is always going to be one that kind of fluctuates, rotates around, getting guys off their feet.
But that's going to be one of these guys that are starting for you because the one guy I did mention is Brendan Donovan.
Exactly. And I think, and this is where I was going to go too, is I think when you're talking about this Cardinals outfield, I think when you look at it, there are center field is probably the one spot that's going to be quote-unquote platooned. And that is, I think, against lefties next year, Edman's the guy that starts in center field, and you have Nootbaar in left. I think and Donovan would be the DH in that scenario. I think against righties, there's a chance you see Nootbaar in center field and Donovan's in left and Burleson's at DH.
So that's one
and that's
spot.
Not really a platoon. That's one spot. And again, that DH spot is always going to rotate. Like every team would prefer to do that rather than what like San Diego has where they've got Matt Carpenter who's their DH and he can't play really anywhere in the field. So the DH spot's always going to rotate. I think when you look at this team, I think most of those positions are set. Like I think that is... I think it's misconstrued that the Cardinals are they're platooning everything because they're rotating guys from positions around just to get guys off of their feet. And I think that the Cardinals, Stoltz said it in that cut that we returned with, said they're not even in the same stratosphere as the Atlanta Braves. They're not right now, but I don't think it's as far apart as some people believe because the offense, though it's not as good as Atlanta's, nobody's as good as Atlanta's. Cardinals have a top 10 offense right now in Major League Baseball. They are 9th in OPS in Major League Baseball. So they have a top 10 offense. Now, they need to address the pitching, but I think if they do that, they go out and they do the moves that we're talking about where they go out and sign a Aaron Nola, they add a whoever you want to be that number 2, whether it be trade or free agency. They add a number 4 via trade or free agency. They find a way to upgrade the bullpen somehow, some way. You're talking about a team that probably isn't going to be viewed as World Series contender right there with the Atlanta Braves, but they are certainly going to be viewed in that second tier in the National League. And that's why I think as much as right now, and it is tough to look at the Cardinals right now and say, wow, they are close to the Atlanta Braves, I think it is a lot closer than people seem to believe, because everybody's just at the point now where it's like, oh, well, we're terrible because there's no chance they can get to the Atlanta Braves next year. I think they can get pretty close to what the Atlanta Braves are next year.
If you look at the lineup, and I'm just going off of the last 4-5 games for the Atlanta Braves, I'll have to pull up what it was all season long, but here are the guys that are in the lineup every single day. Ronald Acuna Jr., Ozzie Albies, Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Sean Murphy, Orlando Arcia. Those are the guys that 99% of the season, you know they're going to be in that lineup. You've got Marcell Ozuna, who is a DH a majority of the time. You've got Kevin Pillar, Michael Harris, and you've got Eddie Rosario. Those 4 guys with Marcell Ozuna, they rotate in and out. They've got Vaughn Grissom as well, who goes in and out with that one. That's really where the Cardinals are at. I mean, you know that Arenado's going to be there. Goldschmidt's going to be there. Walker's going to be there. Wynn's going to be there. Contreras is going to be there. You know that those 6 guys...
Gorman's going to be there.
Gorman's going to be there. Nootbaar's going to be there. That's 8 guys that I just mentioned. And then for that one other spot, much like the Atlanta Braves do, whether it's Rosario or Harris or Ozuna or Kevin Pillar... They've got a lot of guys for 2 positions. The Cardinals have 2 guys that are going to be 1 position. Unless they go out and sign or trade for somebody, then that spot's solidified. Again, the part that I would say, yeah, they're not where the Atlanta Braves are, is the clutch factor. We talked about that in the open of where you're starting to feel a little bit better about guys like Walker and Winn. But every time one of the 9 players steps to the plate for the Atlanta Braves, if it's a runners in scoring position, I know they're going to come through. And I can't say that same thing about this Cardinals team. But that, I have to wait until next season to find out. This year did not go their direction. But with Walker, with Winn, with Gorman on a regular basis, with Nootbaar, with Donovan, with Goldie and Arenado and Contreras, with what we've seen this season, I can't deny that they can do it. It's just a matter of, can you do it on a consistent basis like the Braves?
Yeah, and you said this earlier too. I do think that they did have an issue with kind of rotating players in and out early on in the year. But I think it was the same kind of conversation that we just had at 11:15 about the Blues, where it was they were rotating guys in and out a lot. Why? Because nobody took the job and ran with it. The Cardinals would have loved for Dylan Carlson to get hot and say, okay, you're the everyday center fielder. He didn't hit. He still hasn't hit. He hasn't hit right-handed pitching, and this was before he hurt the ankle. So that was their biggest issue early on. I think the runners in scoring position thing, if it happens again next year, then I'm totally on board with what you just said, where, okay, there's something that's wrong here. For whatever reason this year, it just feels more of a kind of one-off. And you look at the lineup that we just read off for the Cardinals. And again, I'm not going to read it in a batting order, but just listen to the names. Contreras, guy that can be a third impact bat as we've seen recently. Paul Goldschmidt, still a really good player. Arenado, a really good player. Gorman's going to strike out, so I can understand where he would struggle, but he can hit for some serious power. Jordan Walker, as we've seen recently, he can be a guy that could do some damage. Nootbaar, same way. Like, their struggles with runners in scoring position this year, with the bases loaded this year, feel more like a one-off, because if I'm going to look at that lineup and go, wow, that's a deep lineup, that means they're probably going to hit with runners in scoring position, but for whatever reason, they are just running into, whether you want to call it bad luck or just something's been off this year. Maybe it was they started depressed when the season really got away from them early on, and that's what snowballed into them struggling with runners in scoring position. I think they are closer to the Atlanta Braves. I don't think they're going to be the Atlanta Braves. I don't think they're going to be better than the Atlanta Braves. But I don't think it's a massive gap. It's not like we're talking about the Braves compared to the Rockies next year. No, I think the Cardinals can be one of those teams that can, and again, it requires an aggressive offseason. And again, if they don't have an aggressive offseason, we're going to crush them on air once we get to spring training next year.
Well,
but if they are aggressive, I think they've really closed the gap, because if they really improve this pitching staff, you've got the lineup that we just talked about. I think it's going to be mostly everyday players. And you get a rotation that's more modernized, and hopefully you add to the bullpen to help with that too. I think you're a team that is in that second tier of the most of the contenders in the National League.
Yeah, well, and it's not a matter of being them, it's building like them. And that's going to be the hard part for this Cardinals team. is finding ways to build their roster like the Atlanta Braves. And I think you're focusing more because we just talked about, like, your position players are pretty much set next season. It's building on the pitching side of things, and it's finding ways to get the right types of players on the pitching side, whether that's via free agency or via trade. It's really winning the trades if you're going to compare yourself to the Atlanta Braves, because every time the Atlanta Braves seem to make a trade, whether it's bringing in Charlie Morton or finding that guy that nobody expected, sure, they drafted and developed a lot of their guys, but it's winning those trades if you make a trade of bringing in the right free agent. That's how you're going to at least start to build a roster like an Atlanta Braves team.
Yeah, look, just trying to fix the roster in free agency is a terrifying thought, because if they spend big, so they could spend big on Nola. I think we all agree, right? Nola's the quote-unquote safest bet in free agency, if you want to call him that.
the prized possession right now, I would say.
And he's the quote-unquote safest bet because he's been consistent in terms of going out there, and he gives you 6 innings every time, and he starts like 30 games every year. Well, there's a chance you sign him to a 5-6 year deal and he breaks in year 1. And maybe the other starter you signed, let's just use Sonny Gray as a placeholder here, who's been another guy that's been fairly consistent and has made, I think, 29 starts in the last 4 years. There's a chance you sign him to a 4 or 5 year deal and he breaks. And all of a sudden you go from, I think we fixed this rotation, to, holy bleep, we've got old, we've got broken pitchers, and we look more like how the Nationals quickly fell apart with Strasburg and Patrick Corbin. Like, that's a chance that happens. That's why signing pitchers in free agency, or signing anybody in free agency, is terrifying. But you got to do it. You've got to do it. You've also got to be willing to, as you said, go make some trades. Be willing to part with some serious talented pieces on your roster and try and win those deals. Or maybe not even just win the deal, but can you make it a win-win? Can you make it to where if you did make a trade with the Seattle Mariners, you don't look back on it and go, crap, we gave up a MVP caliber player and we got a broken pitcher in return.
Yeah.
Can you make it at least a win-win? And then also to the point of how the Braves have built their roster, you can't do this in an offseason, because this isn't just something that will help you get to this point next year. It's more about having more sustained success over a longer period of time, and it's why the Braves have been successful, and it's also why you fell into this problem that you're in now. You got to be better at the waiver wire, not just now where multiple guys are on there, but like claiming guys that get DFA'd off 40-man rosters in season. You got to be good at that. You got to do a really good job at drafting and developing. That's what the Atlanta Braves have been great at. And you also got to do a really good job at the international free agency. That's where the Atlanta Braves have been great at. You have to be good at multiple facets, not just what it takes to improve the team for this coming season, which is free agency and trade. But if you're going to have sustained success over the next 5 years, it's not just going to be in those 2 spots. It's going to be via the draft. It's going to be via claiming guys that are DFA'd, finding those hidden gems out there on the free agent market, or hidden gems off of other teams' rosters that you can get. And it's also going to be international free agency, where the Cardinals have been a little bit lackluster recently in recent years. So it's going to take all of that to have sustained success. But I think you can do that if you're the Cardinals, and that's where they got to really improve this offseason. That's where the look internally is going to come.
And that's the position you put yourself in. Spencer Strider, of course, the ace for that team, drafted in the 4th round. You developed him. Max Fried, you acquired him when he was a young player from the Padres. And then Charlie Morton, you signed as a free agent. That's the top 3 for that Atlanta Braves team right now. Draft and develop, trade for a young player for that upside, and sign via free agency. And welcome to the task that the Cardinals have in front of them, but you're taking a risk. But once again, you put yourself in that position. He's Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll get back to the Cardinals in about 15 minutes to talk about Tommy Edman and what that role truly is for him. But boy, my day was made when JR dropped a piece on Colton Parayko. And dropped a piece on Colton Parayko that I think creates a question for Blues fans that I'm not sure they have an answer for. We'll find out if they do coming up next here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. So any day that I see an article about Colton Parayko, it's like Christmas for me. I just get excited. And if you haven't checked out JR's piece on The Athletic about Colton Parayko, do yourself a favor and go check it out. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Basically, the article is Parayko, Leo DiCaprio, and Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here. And that's good to hear because the Blues need a number one defenseman, Tanner. And
They
Colton
do need
Parayko,
one, yeah.
No, Parayko is that guy. No, the bigger part about this piece on Colton Parayko is talking about the pressure put on him and how he handles it, how he defines a number one defenseman. It's a really good piece worth your time. But after reading it, I looked over to Tanner and Grant and I said, is there anything that Parayko can do this season to put himself back in good graces with Blues fans? Because as bad as it has been for Colton Parayko, one, he has been injured. The other part of it is he was placed a label on him that if you could go back in time, he would probably say, don't say it. And that was he's our alpha dog now. Because Colton Parayko, although he is the guy that is viewed as the number one defenseman, he's used in a different way than most alpha dogs are. Because when you think of number one defenseman, you think of Norris Trophy candidates. And let's be realistic here. Norris Trophy candidates are putting up 90 to 100 points right now. And that's not Colton Parayko. But in JR's piece, he points out that Parayko has played one of the most minutes among defensemen in the National Hockey League this season. And although his 5-on-5 numbers with goals against are bad, like of the 27 defensemen, he's at the bottom. JR also points out that he plays the most of any defenseman in the NHL that starts in the defensive zone. And that's a tough task for a Colton Parayko to be the number one defenseman, but you're not getting offensive time. That's Krug and Falk. You are going to be the number one shutdown defenseman. And frankly, if you go back to 2019, that was not Colton Parayko. Parayko and Bouwmeester, they were used in the defensive zone, but they were two-way guys. So I'm not sure Colton Parayko can do anything to get back into people's good graces this season. But reading that article tells me that Colton Parayko is in a position that I think is not so much on him to perform, it's on the group of top four defensemen to perform. And if they don't, I think it looks porous on Parayko, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know what he can do to get himself into good graces because I think, as we've seen, without winning a Stanley Cup, it's kind of tough to get to that point. Like Jay Bouwmeester is the guy I kind of think of. Remember, Bouwmeester was kind of the guy that was always
people hated Jay Bouwmeester. People
didn't like Bouwmeester. Yeah. And now that he's gone, I really miss Jay Bouwmeester.
Everybody does.
And I don't think that really changed around him until he got the Stanley Cup, too, by the way. I don't think that the kind of view around him was changed until that cup was brought home in 2019. So I'm not sure what he can do. I do think, though, like, if he can just cut down on some of those long spurts of inconsistency when he is healthy, I think that will help in terms of the fan base and how they view him. But outside of that, I'm not sure because I don't know exactly what kind of brand of hockey people want him to play. I think they want him to play a physical style of hockey. They want him
to be Chris Pronger.
And that's just not going to happen. That's not his game. But can he become that defenseman that when he is on the ice, I do say, you know what? He is the shutdown guy for the St. Louis Blues. And I don't think he's been able to do that since what, the 19 Cup run, ever since Bouwmeester had to retire. He just hasn't been that guy that I look at and go, okay, he's going to really shut things down for the Blues.
I think the issue for him, too, is that I know people don't like this answer, and Tanner, it's a fair pushback with it, but it's not just Parayko. It's also the guy that he's playing with on the ice. And if you're starting the most time of any defenseman in the NHL, like it is Parayko and Vladimir Gavrikov, who starts the most in the defensive zone, that means you're starting your partner in the defensive zone. And think of who his partners have been. Marco Scandella, Jake Wallman, it was Nico Mikkola, and now it's been Nick Leddy, and Torrey Krug was there as well. Like, those are the guys that are also starting in the defensive zone. And the difference between what he used to have with Jay Bouwmeester and now, Jay Bouwmeester was that guy that you want starting in the defensive zone, and now it's Parayko and whoever can work with him. That's why I think this offseason the Blues pursued heavily Travis Sanheim, because that is a guy that we can use with Parayko in the defensive zone.
Yeah, and I'm with you, too, because I think there's one of two things that need to happen for Parayko to fall back into good graces with the fans. Either one, the team needs to get back to the winning ways, which I don't see happening this season. It's going to be a little bit longer than that. Or two, he has to become that physical presence that everybody wants him to. And that's not Colton Parayko. That's just not what you're getting. So Can he get up to a number one defenseman level? Yeah, I think so. Even if he does, I don't think he's going to necessarily fall into good graces with the fans if the team isn't winning like they were, or he's not being the physical presence that the fans would like to see him be.
Yeah, and we got a lot of text on Air Comfort Service text line at 314-399-9646 saying it's not about him being physical or being Chris Pronger. It's we need him to be a presence in front of the net. That I agree with. That is criticism that is fair. But that's also why I think they got rid of Mike Van Ryn and brought in a different presence. And from what I forget, it was Jeremy Rutherford that talked with us a couple of days ago of the mindset of Mike Weber. It seems like they're bringing somebody in who can get that message through to Parayko that might not have been able to. You don't need him to be feisty. You don't need him to be Chris Pronger, but you need him to be tough to play against in front of his own net. And what you said, Grant, Jay Bouwmeester was never viewed as a physical presence. And Jay Bouwmeester, as we touched on, was always viewed as a guy that got the bulk of criticism. But as soon as people started to see how tough it was for others to play against him because of his stick length and speed, people started understanding what Jay Bouwmeester's asset were. Now, that was also covered by having a number one defenseman in Alex Pietrangelo. That's the difference that I think people, to get him back in good graces for everybody, have to understand with this season. It's not what it used to be. Was you had Alex Pietrangelo, which was one of the best, and then the other guys were really good secondary pieces. Now you run your defense with not one clear-cut best guy. You run your defense with your top four needing to be dominant. I mean, if you look at some of the successful teams, this is how they go about it. That's why Colorado went out there and got Devon Taves, because they had Cale Makar, but they needed somebody who worked well with him. Cale Makar's a good defenseman, but he's not great in his own zone. He's good at offensively. You work as a four-man unit now, as a top four defense. If you're starting guys like Falk and Krug in the offensive zone, that means somebody's got to work in the defensive zone. So this is why, as much as this is on Parayko having success this season to change people's minds, that also falls on whoever his pairing mate is going to be, which seems like it's going to be Nick Leddy for the upcoming season.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I said this in the office. I think that for the Blues to exit this retool, and I don't know how long, that could be this year, that could be 2 years from now. I don't think they can get to that point till they find the partner for Colton Parayko. And I don't think Leddy's that guy. I know he's under contract for 3 more years, but I don't think Leddy's that guy. I don't think he's on the roster. And I think the Blues made that apparent by being connected to Travis Sanheim this offseason. As much as that was, they were trying to move on from one of their defensive contracts to try and reset the defense. I think it was more so about that was a part of it, don't get me wrong. But they were more trying to find the guy that's going to partner with Colton Parayko, and that's the biggest thing for them. I think you're spot on. I do think Parayko does need to play better individually, because there are times last year where it was like, man, that's not the Parayko that I was expecting or the Blues should be expecting. But finding his partner and creating that number one shutdown pairing, they can't exit this retool until they find that guy, whoever that is and wherever he is, to pair with Colton Parayko.
Well, and I think the other thing, too, that people get bent out of shape about with Parayko is the contract, making $6.5 a year. But that's not number one defenseman level AAV right there. Like, Esa Lindell, I think, is a good comp for Colton Parayko over in Dallas. He makes $5.8 a year, so not much different than what Colton Parayko makes. But the difference for Esa Lindell and why he's having success, he's got Miro Heiskanen, who's making $8.5 a year. Like, that's a number one defenseman and what a number one defenseman makes. Colton Parayko's not making that. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, while he did get the term, he's not making that level of money.
That's why you signed him to $6.5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're getting paid that way with that. So, Grant Francis, Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, we've got some breaking news with the waiver wires around Major League Baseball. Easier for me to say than discuss. We'll do that next on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Yesterday, the Cardinals and Tommy Edman walked off the Padres for the second day in a row, beating them yesterday 5-4. Cardinals will be off today, back in action tomorrow to start a 3-game set against Pittsburgh. Last night as well, City SC took a 2-1 win over FC Dallas. They're now 15-9-2 on the season. They'll be back in action on Saturday in Kansas City to take on Sporting KC, who they defeated 4-0 back in May. Sporting KC is 7-11-8 this season. And then tonight, Mizzou football will get their season started against South Dakota State. 7 o'clock will be the start time for that one. We got some breaking news coming up next here on BK and Ferrario. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
So we're having an internal debate with Grant Francis and Tanner Hendricks and I'm Alex Ferrario as what type of breaking news this is. Is it the breaking news sounder or is it the T-Bone breaking news sounder? I lean more towards the T-Bone breaking news sounder.
This is bigger than that.
I don't know, though.
It's not big enough
If
for
the Cardinals
true
would have
sounder,
actually done something, it would have been bigger. So I'm going to make the decision as the leader of this show, when BK's here, when BK's not here. It's a Tanner's breaking news. So, Tanner, give it to us all.
Breaking news.
Jeez, that's terrible.
It doesn't deserve mine.
Cardinals did nothing on the waiver wire.
What?
Cardinals did nothing on the waiver wire. It is infuriating. So,
Are you really surprised, though?
No, I'm not, but it's very infuriating. And it was infuriating when you said it yesterday because I knew you were right, but it's even more when I see the teams that claimed them. So, Lucas Giolito, along with Ronaldo Lopez, along with Matt Moore, 2 bullpen arms and a starting pitcher that you desperately need, they got claimed by the Cleveland Guardians. And if you're curious, Alex, where did the Cleveland Guardians fall on the waiver wire? Maybe they were before the Cardinals. No, they were 12th, and the Cardinals were 5th. And we all talked about it yesterday. Essentially, the Cardinals would be the number 1 pick because nobody else is claiming these guys. So they got past the Cardinals, and the Cleveland Guardians said, yeah, we'll take not 1, not 2, but 3. And then, which I really didn't think it was going to happen, but they still got through you, Harrison Bader and Hunter Renfroe got claimed by the Cincinnati Reds. But let's focus on the pitchers. It doesn't make sense. And I know that it was going to happen. I know that if the Cardinals were put on truth serum, they say, well, we need to find out what our guys are. We don't need to worry about what Lucas Giolito or Matt Moore or Ronaldo Lopez are. Why? I think you know what Dakota Hudson is. I think you know what Zach Thompson is. And guess what? Those guys are going to be on your roster next year, and they're going to compete for a number 5 spot. I think you know what Matthew Liberatore is. Right now, you know he's hurt. And when he comes back, maybe he competes. Maybe he's a bullpen arm. You've got Matz. You've got Michaelis. You're good. You don't know what Lucas Giolito is, who could be somebody that you pursue. Let's say Lucas Giolito goes to the Guardians the rest of the season and looks like a legit number 2 starter because he's been in a really bad situation. Now, you don't have any information on him. And that is a miss. And then you got the 2 bullpen arms, which, look, I get it. You got a lot of bullpen arms in there. But if Matt Moore or Ronaldo Lopez has success here, you're talking about trying to bring them back for a team that desperately needs bullpen help.
So the more I thought about it yesterday, and look, I think it probably would have been, I probably would have claimed Giolito if I were sitting in the Cardinals front office. But he's probably really the only one I would have put a claim in on. Matt Moore, Ronaldo Lopez, all these guys just, so we all are clear, are pending UFAs. So it's not like you get a year of control with these guys. The thing that I can understand where the Cardinals came from, because you said you don't know what Lucas Giolito is. That's why you would claim him. You've got a pretty dang good idea what Giolito is. So I can understand the Cardinals saying, you know what? We still believe there's something with Matthew Liberatore. We think Drew Rom, what we saw in his last outing, we think that is more of what Drew Rom is. But instead of claiming a starting pitcher that we could still pursue in free agency and bring him in for 5 starts and then just block a young starter from getting those opportunities, they decided to just let him pass through and go to Cleveland, which happened here, and just say, you know what, let's continue to start Drew Rom. Let's continue to start Matthew Liberatore. We still don't believe we have a good sense on what those guys are, and I think that's fair for Drew Rom. you don't know what you really have in Drew Rom yet. He's only gotten 2 starts. One was terrible, one was pretty good. Matthew Liberatore, there's more question about that, but I can see why they decided, you know what, let's pass on these. Let's just keep what we have internally here, and let's see if we can figure out more of what we have. And also, this allows Dusty Blake at the Major League level to work with all those guys. It allows him to work with a Drew Rom. It allows him to work with a Matthew Liberatore when he comes back from his injury. So I get it. Giolito would have made sense to claim, but I can understand where they're coming from and saying, you know what, it's not a guarantee that we get to keep them. Why burn those 5 starts on him and pay him that money when we got these guys here?
But my pushback is, you know what those guys are. You might not know what they are, but those names that you mentioned, you know they're not going to be 1, 2s, or 3s. You know,
but I don't think you know that.
5s.
You don't know that about Giolito either.
I think you've seen 2 potential in him.
I mean, the way he pitched in L.A., he was a minor leaguer.
But that's what I'd like to find out. It's not so much is he going to be this guy for me. It's more so, can I just cross this guy off my list in free agency? Because I don't want to have this.
Well, I think this could tell you, too, by the way, now that you mentioned that, this could tell you they don't have interest in Giolito.
Maybe.
This could tell you that they view Giolito as someone they're not going to pursue in free agency.
What happens if you miss out on Nola, Snell, Urias, and Yamamoto?
Well, that's the thing is, you can't miss out on them. If you're going to cross Giolito's name off the list, and again, I'm just kind of speculating, it could be one of those where it was more just, let's get the young guys opportunities and we'll look at Giolito in the offseason. But let's run on the assumption of they said, okay, we don't like Giolito. We don't think he's the guy we're going to target in the offseason. So 1, there's no need to put a claim in on him. And 2, you can cross him off your list in the offseason. Well, then what you just said of, well, what if they don't get this? Well, you can't let that happen. That's the thing is, that can't happen. You have to then either overpay or get into the bidding war and win the bidding war if you're the St. Louis Cardinals. So that is why when you started to say that, I went, okay, well, if we cross off Giolito, they can't start losing on all those top-end arms. Or you got to go out and got to go trade for that arm if you end up losing out, too.
I just looked at it as it gives you the opportunity to either say, yeah, this guy is definitely worth our pursuit in free agency, and if he's in-house and it works, then guess what? That makes life easier for you when you got to go into free agency to get that number 1, rather than sitting here and wondering. And maybe you're right. Maybe this is their answer already and saying, yeah, we're already crossing them off the list. But the bullpen one, too, is infuriating. And I understand that, look, you can go get these guys on the market via free agency. You didn't have to bring them in for a month, but why not? I mean, somebody texted in on our Air Comfort Service text line and said, so, Alex, you just want to keep dumpster diving like this Cardinals team does. Yeah, because it's a dumpster of a season. And why wouldn't I want to dive in to see if I can find some pieces that were thrown away that shouldn't have been thrown away, like a Lopez? Because maybe that at least gives you, what if you get, what's his face from a couple of years ago that they let walk in free agency? Why am I blanking on his name right now? Garcia. What if you find another Garcia and you say, let's not let this one get away. Let's let this one be a part of our middle of the bullpen. We're going to talk about this later, but just as much as I feel like the rotation needs to be fixed, you need to really do something with this bullpen.
Yeah, the bullpen one is a little harder to kind of understand their reasoning of not doing it outside of like, hey, we didn't want to pay the remaining freight on Matt Moore's contract. I mean, it's not like, look, for the final, month of the season, it's not like you're paying him $5 million.
Right.
He's probably making like $1 million the rest of the year. But compared to like what someone like, I'm just trying to think who's in that bullpen right now, like Andrew Suarez, for example, he's making a lot less than that than what Matt Moore is because his contract's less. So maybe that's what it is. It was more money, and maybe they don't want to add pieces right now to this team to make it better, and they wouldn't say it publicly, but they are tanking for the higher slot in terms of the draft lottery.
Makes sense.
Which makes sense.
People
That's what a lot
okay
of teams are doing. But I think when you look at the bullpen arms, it's not like with the rotation where it is, if we brought in a Giolito, we would be taking a spot up and blocking a Rom or a Liberatore. So when you look at the bullpen, it's not, they're giving young guys opportunities. Like maybe Wilking Rodriguez comes back, they'll have Helsley back. But do you really need like Casey Lawrence? Do you really need Jacob Barnes, Andrew Suarez? You couldn't take one flyer on one bullpen arm. Right. To your point, see what he looks like. You get to see him in person. You get to look at him, have the medicals on him, and then go, okay, we really like what we saw from Ronaldo Lopez, or we really liked what we saw from Matt Moore. Let's not let him get away like we did with Luis Garcia.
Does the Bader and Hunter, this has nothing to do with the Cardinals because I don't think they were going after any of these guys, but does Bader and Hunter Renfroe getting claimed by Cincinnati surprise you at all?
So the more I've been looking into this, not really, because they were one of those teams that was bad defensively in the outfield. So
Especially
adding
at
Harrison
center
Bader
field.
really helps you in terms of outs above average. They were near the bottom. So
Because you're really good up the middle now.
Bader
with
really helps.
India and De La Cruz and now Bader.
And Renfro's interesting because he's the kind of player that is more of a platoon bat, can hit lefties well. So he's interesting. I think he's a really good pickup that in that ballpark is going to mash significantly. Playing at the Cincinnati small park will really help Hunter Renfroe. What I don't understand is the Guardians' claims of Giolito, Matt Moore, and Ronaldo Lopez. I don't know if they don't scream a team that would be taking the flyer like we were just talking about the Cardinals, where it is bring him in, get to see him, and then maybe you get to sign him in the offseason, because the Guardians are loaded with pitching. Now, this signals that they are trying to make a push for the AL Central.
Yeah.
They are 5 games back with a month to go. So, like,
Pretty much already yours. But
maybe the Guardians view it 5 games back of the Minnesota Twins and are saying, you know what? Why not? Why not just go for it? Really help really show our fan base that we want to get into the playoffs. But they're the ones that surprised me. I'm surprised the Guardians decided to make 3 claims on these 3 pitchers, because I thought for sure that Giolito was going to fall to like the San Francisco Giants, and these bullpen arms were going to go to like the Marlins, who are looking for bullpen help. I did not see the Guardians coming up and stepping in and saying, we're going to claim these 3 pitchers.
And then poor Randall Grichuk.
Yeah, man.
Left without a team.
How do you feel going into your
waived.
free agency year, and the Angels go, we're putting you on waivers, there's a chance somebody claims you. Oh, okay, good. Randall, you're in the lineup today. Where at? Here. What? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Nobody wanted you.
You went from bottom to top in teams in Major League Baseball, and they said, no, not so much on Randall Grichuk. How do you feel about how much you and BK wanted to pursue Randall Grichuk now that no team wanted him?
Well, in my defense,
I don't think there is an in my defense right now.
I'm sure the Royals would love a Randall Grichuk if they weren't trying to lose. You know?
What about the teams that are trying to win?
Well, they're loaded in the
But
outfield.
you wanted Randall Grichuk when they were trying to win.
Yeah, I mean, he was much better than Dylan Carlson this year offensively.
Poor Randall Grichuk. But, again, if you missed it,
Former Cardinal Dominic Leone claimed by the Mariners. How come we didn't talk about him?
another winning player right there. Cardinals missed out on another bullpen arm. If you missed it, though, Giolito, Ronaldo Lopez, Matt Moore claimed by the Guardians, Harrison Bader, Hunter Renfroe claimed by the Cincinnati Reds. So the waiver claims are now complete, and the Cardinals roster has no changes to it. We've got the junk drawer coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. It is time that we dive into our junk drawer today. And T-Bone, you got something for us special.
What, did you guys see this where you can now, ESPN has partnered with the Theater Sports Network to where they will be televising some ACC college football games and the college football playoffs at some movie theaters. Are you in on going to the movie theaters to watch a football game?
This is just like when movie theaters tried to do something
let me ask
special to
someone
get you
that's
paid
not
money.
antisocial. Grant.
That's not even antisocial, though. I would much rather watch it in my own house where I don't have to pay for drinks and food than watch it at a theater and have to pay.
We've already talked about this. You take things into the movie theater you're not supposed to.
Very
so
true.
You don't have to pay for things anyway.
But I still have to pay for that, whereas my food's already bought at home. And I don't have to leave the middle of the game to go to the bathroom.
Well, that's your own fault. I mean, you do.
Wait.
Are you taking the TV into the bathroom at home?
No, but my television is close to my bathroom. I'm going to turn the volume up, and I can still hear it. I got to walk out into the common area to go to the bathroom.
I mean, you have the end of quarters, halftime.
That's not enough time, man. That's when everybody's going to the bathroom.
High maintenance.
I don't need to wait in line to go to the bathroom. I go home, and there's no line there. There's no pee on the floor there. Can wash my hands fine. This is all this. I got my own cup holders at home. I got a comfortable couch. I don't have to sit in a sticky seat. Why is this appealing for people?
I'm fascinated to know what this looks like.
How much money is it to go?
I have not seen where it says how much it is.
That's the other thing.
All I've seen is they're going to do 75 games in movie theaters this fall.
You really want to go pay like $25 to go watch a football game on a big screen?
I mean, it's like being in a mini crowd if it's full.
I can have a mini crowd in my house.
Who's going to be
you wouldn't.
Who's going to be the person that goes, shh, we're in a movie theater?
Absolutely.
Okay,
That's a
then I
Ferrario
get irritated.
That's a Ferrario move.
I'm watching a football game. Yeah. I'm so out on this.
I don't know if I would want to do it. I would go to do it once just to experience it and see what it's like. Because I think Grant's right. It does have somewhat of a kind of a crowd atmosphere like you're at a game. It's on a really big screen. Like, don't get me wrong. I like I don't remember what I've got, 50-inch TV. But, like, I can go from 50 to, like, 80-inch TV with surround sound. And I can go and buy a soda. I can get some food while I'm there, too. Like, I can see where this could potentially be appealing.
Someone said Alex doesn't want to go because he sits down to pee. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not doing that in a public bathroom. So nailed the text line. You thought you were making fun of me. Joke's on you. Yes.
573. No beer. That is a big knock. Now,
some of them
theaters,
sell beer.
I was going to say, some theaters do have beer, or you could do like...
if you get intoxicated while you're watching it, they're probably going to kick you out.
Yeah.
I just think it's stupid.
Isn't that the whole point of football games, am I right?
But I find this interesting because I'm interested to know how this goes over. And if people are going to have the same approach as Alex, where it's like, why would I go pay to go watch that?
I think it'd be a big hit at first, and then like most things, it would start to fall off.
They tried this with UFC fights too, though, and it didn't work.
UFC fights aren't the same as a football game. I know for a football game that if I'm paying now look, the game could be a blowout, but I know if I'm paying for my ticket, I know for the next 2.5 to 3 hours, I'm locked in on a football game. For a UFC fight, you could spend that money to go watch it, and the guy could kick him in the head, and the fight's over in a matter of minutes.
But there's multiple fights, and for UFC, that costs you like $100 to watch it because it's like pay-per-view, whereas a football game, like you're not paying to watch that anywhere else, but now you're paying to go somewhere to watch it. Someone texted in and said, Alex doesn't have friends, I can tell.
Yeah.
Probably correct. I don't, nobody ever wants to hang out with me around here. I asked Mike Ryder, and he's like, no.
Would you do it once, though, just to experience it?
I'd try it just to see what it was like.
And he'd leave after the first quarter because he'd be irritated.
Only if it wasn't fun. If it was fun, then maybe I'd be in. Because someone said it's like a sports bar. Yeah, and like for big games, sports bars are fun. Like during that cup run, I would have much rather been watching those at a sports bar if I couldn't have been at the game than watching it at home by myself. But like week 3 of the college football season, like, do I really want to go drop $25 to go watch a game in a movie theater?
Someone says this from the 618, a theater in Edwardsville had Battlehawks watch parties. Was pretty fun. I didn't know they did that. That's actually...
I never heard about that.
Yeah, you know what would be awful? If you paid this money because you wanted to go and there was a group of people and have fun and you go and nobody else is there, so you're paying to watch it in a movie theater by yourself.
That's why you should go to one of the early games.
10 a.m.
In this article that I read, in week 1, the Virginia game in Nashville against Tennessee will be in a movie theater. North Carolina versus South Carolina, which is a primetime game in week 1, will be there as well, along with LSU's top 10 showdown against Florida State. So, like, if you go to one of those games and, like, then I think you're going to see where people are like us, where it's like, hey, I'd go just to experience it. If you wait till like one of the last games of the year, that may not be the case if this doesn't go over well.
Someone also brought up another good point. Like, how many fist fights are going to be taking place in these movie theaters during these games?
They need extra security.
Yeah, like you're going to have. There's going to be some type of viral video of somebody just getting beat up at a movie theater watching this games, and that's when this all goes down the hole.
I will say, I think movie theaters would struggle to have success with this, just because if I'm going to go out and go to like a watch party sort of vibe, I just go to Ballpark Village. Like if it was a Blues game or a Cardinals game, I just go to Ballpark Village.
It's because it's an open area. Like that's maybe the other thing too, where it's like you're contained into that seat. You know, like it's not like it's an open area. Like, you know, at Ronnie's where they have that when you walk in and they got those cars and the big television screen. Like, that's like an open area. And I remember March Madness when I was younger, you'd go there to see a movie and the games would be on and people would just be standing around. Like, that's cooler. That's where Ballpark Village is appealing rather than I'm in a movie theater, you're sitting in this seat. Because let's be honest, those seats are not comfortable.
Some are.
You just negative all the time.
They're not comfortable, man.
The newer ones, have you been to the IMAX theaters with the like leather seats?
Dude, somebody asked me that the other day. They said, when was the last time you went to a movie? I said, probably 2018.
Well, okay.
It's been a while.
Say the last movie I saw was Oppenheimer, and that was just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Worth it.
Someone asked the question, too, why is there so much pee on the floor in the bathrooms? Have you been to public bathrooms?
Yeah, they're tough.
They're everywhere, man. Nobody knows how to use those anymore, which is why everybody should sit down to urinate. Tanner Hendrickson, Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Terrible idea by T-Bone, but again, I don't have friends, so it makes a lot of sense. You know who does have friends? The Cardinals rotation. Terrible segue.
So Cardinals. What the hell does that mean?
It's a terrible segue. I figured it would be not good at all. Can the Cardinals have a rotation like the Milwaukee Brewers? You might be like, what the hell does that mean? Tanner will explain next on 101 ESPN. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. It is BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. By the way, we're live on YouTube, our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL, so you can go check that out as we continue throughout the day today. No BK today or tomorrow. He will be back on Monday. So we talk a lot about the rotation for the Cardinals, which makes sense because that's their biggest area of need. And, of course, when teams are successful, you try and figure out how you can be a copycat of them. And I think a lot of people look at Texas and say, oh, well, the Cardinals need to go about it like the Texas Rangers did, where you spend a lot of money in free agency and you bring guys in. Everybody wants to be the best, so you look at the Braves and wonder, can you develop talent like them? But Tanner brought up another team that he went down a rabbit hole last night that the Cardinals might need to emulate their rotation building after. T-Bone, who was it?
So I don't know if you can build like them, but can you get a rotation that looks somewhat similar to it? Because all these guys were drafted and developed, and that's the Milwaukee Brewers looking in your own division. I found it interesting. So there was a piece on ESPN.com talking about, what makes the Braves so good. Can anybody beat them? And this was written by Jesse Rogers. And I find it interesting. So I want to read something here from this piece. Several respondents talking about executives here, however, added that the Milwaukee Brewers are in the mix with the Dodgers and Phillies as teams that could potentially beat the Atlanta Braves in the playoffs. They're the hottest team in the NL, and the case for them comes down to three names. Now that Woodruff is back, the Brewers are as good as anyone else in the NL, one executive said. Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta have been doing it for a while, and their offense is better than that since Santana joined them. But Milwaukee, in a short series, could potentially test the Atlanta Braves. Like, when we think about the Milwaukee Brewers, we don't think about their offense. Sure, like they added Carlos Santana. Oh, boy. But their offense is not that great. Their offense last year was the biggest reason they fell apart down the stretch, and the fact that the front office was like, oh, we're in it? Okay, we'll just trade Hader. But I look at the Brewers, and when you talk about the Milwaukee Brewers, if they are being viewed across Major League Baseball as someone that can compete with the Atlanta Braves, the best team in the NL East, why? Because just those three names at the front of their rotation. I look at what the Cardinals have to do this offseason, and I go, can you build a rotation that is not you can't do it how Milwaukee did it, because that takes years to develop like Milwaukee did. Can you go do that and build some kind of rotation that kind of resembles what Milwaukee has?
Meaning
which is swing and miss
1A, 1B.
stuff, 1A, 1B, kind of what Philly has, but they don't have the really number three like Freddie Peralta. Freddie Peralta is a really good number three for Milwaukee. He's not, I don't think he's a two anywhere, but he's a really good number three that's got swing and miss stuff. Now, Woodruff and Burns have been like 40% above league average when you look at their numbers when they've been healthy their last 4 years. So I don't know if you can go get two of those guys, but can you create a rotation that somewhat resembles what the Milwaukee Brewers have this offseason? And when you do that, can you make it good enough to where teams can look at you next year and go, well, the Cardinals have a good offense, but look at their pitching. Their pitching could shut down an Atlanta Braves lineup, or it could shut down a LA Dodgers lineup. I just find it interesting that we never talk about the Brewers. I don't even really consider them a legitimate contender, but apparently executives across baseball say, hey, they could beat the Braves in a short 5-game set. Why? Because those three horses that they've got at the front of their rotation.
Yeah, so if you're trying to emulate what the Brewers have, you have a legit 1-2 punch, much like Washington had when they won with Strasburg and Scherzer, much like what you're seeing in Philadelphia with Nola and Wheeler. And rather than having a one and then a bunch of guys who are competing for upside, you have a 1-2 punch and then everybody else. And if we're going after the Brewers, you got I think Michaelis fills the spot that we're talking about Peralta. Now, I know Michaelis is getting some of us concerned for how the season is going, but if you look at the last couple of years, including this year, Michaelis has been what Freddie Peralta has been. So then it's just talking about getting that 1-2 punch. And to accomplish that, you're talking sign and trade. You're not talking two signings. Because if you're going down the path of two signings because to do this, you're talking going to get Nola and Snell or Nola and Yamamoto. And as much as people want to see that happen, that's $60 million that you're dropping on two guys. Maybe if we're on the lower side of it, $50 million. And Cardinals aren't going to put that towards two people. So that's where if you want to emulate that, now we go back to what I talked about and what I've been just begging for, which I know you guys put a treaty on it, but let's be honest, the treaty maker's not here in BK. Make a trade with Seattle. Go get one of those guys But to do that, you're giving up assets off of your own team. But that's the only way that you can do Milwaukee, is a signing of a free agent and trading for another one, because I just don't see this team dropping that much money on two guys.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to try and emulate what Milwaukee has, and I think you're probably right. I don't even know if you can do it, because Woodruff has been, and he's been unhealthy the last couple of years. He just returned from an injury not that long ago. I think he's made 5 starts this year.
Yeah.
But when him and Burns have been healthy and have been starting like 30 games in a season, they've been 40% above league average.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't even know if there's one guy that you can kind of look at and say could be that for maybe Blake Snell, because he's got a lot of swing and miss.
Burns, you mean?
Burns / Woodruff.
Oh, I got you. Okay. They're the same player.
It's interesting how Woodruff I feel like he flies under the radar, even though they've basically been the same guy. But I don't know if you can kind of take what Milwaukee has and go, okay, can we get two guys 40% above league average? Probably not, because like we compared him yesterday, Yamamoto, could he be what Tanaka was for the Yankees when they signed him? He was 14% above league average in his time with New York. So maybe if you sign Blake Snell, pull off the trade that you're talking about, you'd have to give up a significant piece of like a Nolan Gorman to Seattle to get a Logan Gilbert or a George Kirby or whatever piece you want, and then go out there and sign like a number 3 or 4 like Paxton, someone like that. It's possible they could do that this offseason. But even then, that is one where it's like, okay, it's tough to look at that and say, is that what Milwaukee has? I just find Milwaukee to be fascinating, because the only reason they're in the conversation is because of their pitching.
The third one, though, the tough part for the Cardinals, if it's not Michaelis, is you're going upside. And Milwaukee knows what they're getting from Freddie Peralta. Like, he's going to be a legit number 3 for you. And anybody you sign, if you deem Michaelis a number 4, you're going upside. Because now you're talking about even more money that you're spending, unless you're trading for that number 3. But again, now you're talking about a ton of money. Let me ask you this. Does Dylan Cease match any of those? Because Logan Gilbert seems like it's not going to happen. And any of those other Seattle guys, they're unknown commodities right now. Does Dylan Cease match what Burns or Woodruff is? Because I heard the morning show talk about it today of trading Gorman and Graceffo to get a Dylan Cease from Chicago. But to me, Dylan Cease had one dominant year, and that was last year when he won the Cy Young. Other than that, he's been about 10 points over league average, and this year he's been underperforming. Does he match that?
That's a good question.
Because that's the type of trade we're talking about here.
I think he probably matches it more than like a Logan Gilbert if you're going to go this route. If you're going, let's get two guys with just electric swing and miss stuff at the top of our rotation. Because both last year when he finished second for Cy Young and 2021, he was 38% above league average. So if you're going to get to the point that we're talking about get two guys that have got legit swing and miss stuff, like some of the best in baseball stuff, could you do a sign Blake Snell, trade for Dylan Cease, figure out what your number 4 is, whether it be trade market or signing again? Paxton's kind of my placeholder for that spot. Or maybe even like a Germán Marquez who's recovering from Tommy John, or a Tyler Mahle, guy on a reclamation project. I think you could potentially be looking at like a front end rotation of Blake Snell. Yes, he does have the walk issue, but you saw like his stuff is great. Like he had 9 strikeouts and 5 walks in the outing against the Cardinals and held them to 2 hits and no runs. He's got great swing and miss stuff. And then you have a guy like Dylan Cease that if you can figure out why did it go wrong this year for him, then yeah, I think you've got a making of something that looks somewhat similar to Milwaukee, to where teams would look at you going into the playoffs and go, oh, we don't want to face that. That's that thing that what BT said, I can't remember if it was last year.
Yeah, bleep, we got to face these guys.
Oh, bleep, we've got to face this guy today. That's what that kind of rotation would be. If you were to give Snell the money he's looking for, trade for Dylan Cease, and get someone that's kind of that number 4 and have Michaelis as your 3.
The first thing that's going to have to happen with this is the Cardinals admitting that Miles Michaelis is not a number 3. And that's the part that I guess you're just going to have differing opinions on, because at sometimes I feel like he is a number 3. Somebody texted in and said he's 28-40 in his last 3 years. He's not a number 3. First of all, I'm not going to look at record to determine if he's a number 3. You'll look at the amount of innings he's throwing and the ERA, and he's got a 3.9 ERA, and he's thrown about 366 innings. I mean, 3.9, you'd probably like that to be a little bit lower if you're a number 3, but I mean, I don't know about you, T-Bone, but a number 3 for me, I would determine somewhere around like a 3.3, 3.6 ERA.
The thing that's tough with Michaelis and trying to figure out if he's a 3 is he pitches to so much contact. So, like, I know, like, people don't like when I say this, but if you're a pitch-to-contact pitcher, you're kind of a pitcher that really needs to rely on some luck.
And defense.
And a good defense. Yeah, and that's another thing, too. And if the Cardinals, which have had a bad defense this year, it can lead to some runs against Miles Michaelis. The tough part with Michaelis is, as much as, like, you say, well, Dylan Cease had a 4 ERA this year. Why would you bank on him? Well, look at Michaelis when he's been healthy. Michaelis, when he's been healthy, 2019 or 2018, really good. 2019 was okay. Then he dealt with the injuries, was great last year, and then this year's a down year. Like, he has the same roller coaster that we're talking about with Cease, but the thing that he can't rely on that Cease does have, Cease has swing and miss stuff. He's striking out like 9-10 batters per 9 innings. Miles Michaelis isn't that guy. He's like averaging like 6 strikeouts per 9. So there's just a bit of a difference there. And like Peralta, who I said is a 3 for Milwaukee, he's averaging 11.5 strike. He's got 11.5 strikeouts per 9 innings right now, and he's a number 3, and he's got like a 4 ERA. If Michaelis had more swing and miss, I'd feel really comfortable saying, yeah, he's a number 3. Right now, I think it's okay to have him as a 3 as a pitch-to-contact innings eating pitcher.
But if you can upgrade, you're in a better spot.
If you can upgrade and you have some money left, because we don't know what the budget will be for the Cardinals this offseason, but say you sign Blake Snell, you trade for Dylan Cease, you add a bullpen arm, and then you look at it and you go, you know what, we got $12 million left. Let's throw it in at another number 3 starter on the market, give him a 1-year deal.
Here's where I don't want them to do that, because if you're talking about Milwaukee, what I would imagine most executives believe Milwaukee could give Atlanta a run for their money is not just because of Burns and Woodruff and Peralta. It's also because the back end of their bullpen, if you get there, it's going to be tough to deal with. And that is not the Cardinals. And it's hard for me to say I want them to spend all of their money on going to get 2 legit guys in free agency and then get maybe that 3rd, because now my bullpen's not going to be upgraded. And for me, if this team wants to be competitive, as much as I want to see them go out there and get 2 studs, maybe 3 studs for your rotation, this team also has to go get 2, at best 2 arms, but at least 1 more legit stud for your bullpen, because going into next season, you've got Gallegos, who is inconsistent, Helsley, who I don't know if he's healthy, and Romero, who I just can't judge him on 1 season. And then from there, I got a bunch of unknowns. Sure, Wilking Rodriguez might be an option, but I don't know what the heck he is. Guillermo Zuniga, he's either injured or the Cardinals don't believe he's a bullpen arm.
I'm leaning towards option B.
Probably yes, but you could go out there and get Nola and go out there and trade for Dylan Cease and go out there and sign my guy Luis Severino and say, we're ready to go. But if my bullpen looks like what it does now, doesn't matter, because if one of those arms goes down, my bullpen ain't going to be able to handle this.
And that's why I think, like, as much as we talk about they need 3 major league pitchers going into this offseason, or they need to acquire 3 major league pitchers this offseason, I do think one of them is probably going to have to come via trade, because it does save money to do what you're talking about. Because I do think they need a minimum 1 arm to be added to that bullpen. And I do think this equation can change depending on how Gallegos finishes the season. Excuse me, I'm getting
emotional about this?
Well, you
buddy?
know how I love a good bullpen.
You do love pitching.
But I think you're right, because you look at Ryan Helsley. He's not a guy that's going to...
I don't trust that.
I think he's got electric stuff, but I don't know how he translates, because we've seen this year, like, he's kind of Tyler O'Neill-ish, where it is, I'm not really feeling it today, I don't think I'm going to take the ball. You look at, from the left side, Jojo Romero. I think you're spot on. He's been great this year, but it's really the first year he's had an opportunity and has really proven that. What's he look like next year? Gio had some alarming outings for the Cardinals this year. I'm a little bit concerned about him going into next year. So there are question marks around your top arms. They definitely do need to add somebody else. If they're going to be like what the Brewers are, you're right. Not only do you need a top 2 that's got swing and miss stuff and is electric, you've got to have a bullpen that is really deep as well.
And my concern with all of this is the way that Michael Gersh pushed back when we talked to him a couple of months ago, when I said, like, there's a lot to do on this list. How are you going to accomplish all of them? And he said, well, we actually don't feel like there's that much to do. He was optimistic about the bullpen. You can't be optimistic about any of your pitching going into next season, because if you are, you're going to convince yourself that I don't have to spend the amount of money that's necessary to make my team competitive. And I just don't believe the Cardinals can accomplish being a winning team without being aggressive on both the free agent market and trades to try and build this rotation and bullpen the way that's necessary. Everybody's favorite segment of the week is coming up next. T-Bone's warming up the pipes, believe it or not, comes your way after this on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Rhino Shield. Busy Bubbles Laundry in Alton, Illinois made the right decision to update the exterior of their business. And you might be a business owner right now, have had your business for 20 plus years and think, you know what, mine's looking a little worn down. Everybody's drove past it, right? Where the paint's chipping off the wall, where it's got water damage, the roof looks worn down. Rhino Shield can change all of that. And the best part about it is Rhino Shield is not using paint. It's a ceramic coating that cures 8 to 10 times thicker than any other paint that you're going to buy over the counter. Thinking I could just do this myself? Yeah, you can, but it's only going to last about a year. When Rhino Shield does the work, it's backed by a 25-year transferable warranty. It's 100% waterproof. It's 90% deflecting of the UV rays, and they do every type of siding you can think of. So give Darren a call, have them come out and give you a free estimate and explain why using Rhino Shield is the right decision for your home or business. I used them. We've fallen in love. 877-25-RHINO. That's 877-25RHINO.com. Tanner is just casually walking into the studio. T-Bone, you missed it, my man. Here it comes. Believe it or not,
I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so
free.
Flying away
on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be?
Believe it or not, it's just me.
He just walks in from the bathroom and just nails it.
Might have been my best performance yet.
I filled in for BK.
That had to be a quick commercial break, by the way.
Or a long pee, whichever one you want to say.
I thought I was pretty quick,
but
actually.
I don't think you were. You casually walking down the hallway, my man. You need to have some foot speed.
I'm not going to lie.
Let's get some high knees.
I thought our executive producer, Mike Ryder, was pulling a fast one on me.
Well,
he's like, hey, you're live. I'm like, yeah, right.
You need to get
around to the corner.
You need to get some high knees when you're coming down this hallway, not this casual stroll around the building.
Must be getting
By the way, I nailed BK's part, so he is out moving forward. I'll hit the high pitch stuff.
I should take some accountability here too, because I should have moved some time up in that.
You should have seen Grant's face when he knew we were coming back. It looked like he just saw a car coming at him and he was a deer. He's like, "Oh my God, T-Bone's not here."
Well, because I'm not saying, so it's gonna be all on you, Alex.
I won American Idol on karaoke once, and I'm incredible. So when T-Bone's not here, I'll take it. It is Believe It or Not on 101 ESPN's BK and Ferrario. Tanner Hendrickson, voice of an angel. Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Send us your Believe It or Not scenarios to 314-399-9646. That's our Air Comfort Service text line, or you can send them over on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Let's start with this one, boys. Believe it or not, The Cardinals starting 9 will be one of the most consistent starting 9 in Major League Baseball next season. And I don't know how you judge this, but what I'm coming after is the starting 9 next season is going to be to the level of every single day, 9 guys are going to be in their starting positions.
Well, I'm not going to believe that because I think there will be one platoon. And try not to riot St. Louis, but I think there will be one platoon.
Can't have one platoon, man.
I think some of the consistency of the offense, like what happens in like what they just went through before the last 2 wins. Like, yes, was it a little alarming the offense had been struggling against some okay pitching like Paul bleeping Blackburn? Yeah, but I also know, one, like, these guys are in the dog days of summer for a team that's not playing for anything. And 2, every offense goes through a cold stretch. Like, I think it gets overstated how much the inconsistency of the Cardinals offense, because we watch it every day. If we watch the Braves every day, I'm sure there would be a time that we would say, oh, wow, the offense has gone cold here. Or if you watch the Dodgers for a stretch, you'd go, oh, the offense has gone cold here. I think it is just over-amplified here because we have to watch it every day.
I think it'll be more consistent next year, but as long as you have 2 guys like Tommy Edman and Brendan Donovan, who they love to use as utility guys, I don't see it being consistent every single day.
But isn't that as consistent as the Atlanta Braves? Because even if they've got 2 guys that are playing one position, they're going to be out there. I'm just asking consistency. And consistency is, I know it's either going to be Edman or Donovan in the outfield.
I'm still not going to believe it.
I'm not going to believe it either, by the way. I'm just throwing it out there because I wanted to see where you guys were.
Believe it or not, the St. Louis Cardinals will sign a former Cardinal this offseason. So just a couple names real quick that will pop into this category.
Dominic Leone.
Well, technically, yes. I didn't even think of him. But Randall Grichuk, Harrison Bader, pitching-wise, Michael Wacha, because I saw Lisa text in and ask about him. He probably...
I thought he signed one where he had an option with San Diego.
He's got a mutual option.
Oh, okay.
And I could see where he maybe explores the market. I'm not 100% sure on that. Then you also got guys that they traded this past deadline, like Montgomery, Jack, Hicks, Stratton. So believe it or not, they will sign one former Cardinal and we'll have a reunion.
I'll believe this one, and I don't think it's going to be an outfielder. I think it's going to be a pitcher.
Carpenter. Oh.
Matt or Chris?
Well, I would assume
Chris is willing to come out of retirement. I guarantee that man can still deal. No, it's going to be a pitcher. Waka's intriguing because he's had success now in 2 different places in 2 years. And I would imagine the Cardinals are thinking if we got to go get a 3-4 for cheaper, he might be that option. I don't believe it's going to be Bader or Grichuk, though. They're going to be set with their outfield. You're going to have Nootbaar and Walker. No, those guys are out there. We've talked about Edman and Donovan as utilities. You're going to have Alec Burleson. And frankly, you might not be able to trade Carlson and O'Neill. Carlson and O'Neill. You might have the same damn outfield as you had this year, just with more consistency in terms of 2 of those 3 players. But I'll say believe it, because I believe one of those pitchers will be a Cardinal again.
I'm not going to believe it just because I think on the starting pitching market, they're going to go out and get the high-end guys and not really have the money to spend to bring those guys in. So I'm not going to believe it. For me, believe it or not, the Cardinals will sign 2 starting pitchers. Zach Thompson will be your 5th starter. And the Cardinals will also sign a bullpen piece out of that.
I'm not going to believe it. Thompson's not going to be a starter next year unless someone gets hurt in camp. They will, and the reason that I'm not playing off of that assumption is because you said only signed 2. I think they're adding 3 major league starters this offseason. And I know a lot of people, look, I understand the skepticism.
Via free agency or trade in free agency?
I think it's...
Because I don't think it's all free agency.
I don't think it's all free agency either. I think they're probably trading for somebody. But Thompson's role going into spring training next year will be you're stretched out as a starter. Maybe we carry you as a swingman in the bullpen that can eat some innings if needed. Or you're going to be that number 1 guy down in Memphis. And if he is in the rotation opening day, my assumption is it's because somebody got hurt that they either signed or Michaelis or Matz is dealing with an injury. So I'm not going to believe it because Thompson's not going to be in this rotation unless something's gone wrong.
I'm curious with him if they're going to make it a competition between he and Steven Matz. I wonder if they're to the point where they just don't know with Steven Matz and they're fed up and Thompson deals at spring training and they say, hey, you know what? Matz might be a bullpen piece to start things off so we can keep him healthy all season long. But I'm also not going to believe this one because I do think they're going to sign or trade for 3 starting pitchers. I think you're going to get the top-end guy, whether it's Aaron Nola or Blake Snell. I think you're going to get some type of project like a Luis Severino or a Tyler Mahle, and then I think you're trading for another guy.
I think if Zach Thompson pitches the way he has and he sustains this throughout the rest of this season, I think they try him as a starter next season. Just because, what's the next step for Zach Thompson? If they see him as a starter long term, what's the next step for him? Are they going to continue to yank him around like they did, throughout the beginning of this season? Or are you just going to let him keep the spot that he sort of earned at the end of this season?
Yeah, I'm fascinated to know what they do with Thompson. I think the people don't want to hear this because you mentioned what do they do with Matz and Thompson. I think the contract puts Matz in the rotation.
Yeah, well, and you also have Hudson too, though.
Well,
I'm saying Hudson might be over Zach Thompson for how he's performed at the end of the season.
I think Thompson will be above Hudson. I think it's possible the way that Thompson has performed that he may actually bump Hudson out. And what I mean by that is maybe because originally it was, okay, Hudson's pitched really well, maybe he's the 6. But if Hudson's the 7th or the 8th on the depth chart, are you going to tender him because he's going to be making millions of not millions, but $1 million some
billions
bucks in the minor leagues? I don't know. Maybe you tender him and trade him. I got another one for you. Believe it or not, let's go to the NFL here. The Green Bay Packers finish above 500.
Not believe this. I think the hype on Jordan Love is just overrated. I just haven't seen it from Jordan Love that says he can be a competent quarterback, and he doesn't have weapons. Like Christian Watson is their best weapon right now.
Stud.
It was a stud like the final 4 or 5 weeks of the season, but also had Aaron Rodgers throwing to him. And also, they say that Aaron Jones is the lifeblood of that team. If Aaron Jones is the lifeblood of that team, I don't know if Aaron Jones is going to make it through the full season. So I don't see it. I think they're going to be a 500 team, maybe a game or two better, but I don't see them being a successful team.
This is a tough one because I see them being right around that area of 500 at the end of the season. But being in the NFC and playing a lot of teams that are bad, I could see the Packers getting over 500, so I'll believe it.
I'm not going to believe it either because I'm kind of with Alex. I think the hype on Jordan Love is getting...
It's getting absurd.
It's not like they're saying, hey, he can get them to the Super Bowl.
No, but he's using the Wilson Contreras, this is my house, this is my team now.
It is interesting how all of a sudden everybody's kind of viewing Green Bay as like a team that can be competing in the NFC North. And I look at them and I go, really? Yeah, okay, your defense is good, but even great defensive teams that have a bad quarterback situation, like the Saints is a team that immediately pops into my mind. The Broncos have a team that can pop into my mind.
They're the third best team in the NFC North. And
behind Detroit and the Bears?
Yeah. And I mean, I can understand people saying the Vikings are better than them because Justin Jefferson, Kirk Cousins, Jordan Addison, they've got a better... Now, did they fix their defense? Probably not. Green Bay's got a better defense. But I believe the Lions and Bears are better than the Packers going into this season.
I think the Lions are the team that should be favored to win the division, and I think they will. I think the Bears, the Vikings, and the Packers are all kind of right in that same area. I think the I think the Vikings and the Bears will be better than Green Bay, just because I just don't trust Jordan Love. I have no reason to believe Jordan Love can be that guy.
This is an interesting one from the 618. Believe it or not, we don't see Yadier Molina at Busch Stadium at all this season.
Why would we?
Waino's last start.
Yeah, I mean, even then,
I think we see him there, then. I think we see him then. Are you a little surprised that we haven't seen him at all yet this season?
No. He didn't even want to be here last year. He went to Puerto Rico.
Well,
he's
his
got a basketball team
was going for the championship.
Well, that's
Jinx,
what he's doing now.
Well, maybe the season will be over by then. You're going to see him. I'm not going to believe this. You'll see him in Waino's last start, especially if he's going for 200. You'll see him.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if he wasn't there at Waino's final game.
He'll be on the field. He'll probably catch first pitch or something he'll be there. He'll be there. Not catch first pitch from Waino. You get the ceremonial first pitch. But Yadi will be there.
Yeah, I bet Albert will be there too.
Yeah, you're going to see.
Albert was at the Cardinals Hall of Fame inductions when that happened.
Yeah, he was front row,
a couple weekends ago.
Yeah. So, he'll be there. That was Believe It or Not. Thank you for all the text on Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Let's get to some NFL quick hitters. And one topic that I didn't believe BK yesterday, now I'm starting to wonder. We'll get to that next on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with the SportsCenter update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Yesterday, Tommy Edman and the Cardinals walked off the Padres for the second day in a row, taking them down 5-4 yesterday. Cardinals are off today. They'll be back at it tomorrow against Pittsburgh to start a 3-game set with the Buccos. Last night as well, St. Louis City SC takes down FC Dallas 2-1, and St. Louis City SC is now 15-9-2 on the season. They'll be back in action on Saturday in Kansas City to take on Sporting KC, who is 7-11-8 this season. And back in May, St. Louis took down KC 4-0. Tonight, Mizzou will start their football schedule against South Dakota, and the start time for that at 7 o'clock. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
All right, let's get to some NFL quick hitters alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario, and we'll start with a question BK posed yesterday that I kind of pushed back on, saying, I think we're good here. Whether Joe Burrow's getting that contract extension, if the injury's playing into it. I just figured this was preseason, and it's let's just make sure Joe Burrow's ready to go for the start of the season. Now I'm not so sure, because if you missed it, Zach Taylor was talking earlier today, wouldn't commit on Joe Burrow starting in week 1. He said, quote, just taking it day to day right now. I don't know if he's going to start week 1. Now, maybe this is just the Bengals being the Bengals and trying to make everyone wonder, and there's Joe Burrow trotting out to the field on the first game.
Really got to keep them Cleveland Browns off balance.
Really got to make sure that, who's their quarterback? Oh, Deshaun Watson's not expecting this one, but if he doesn't start, is that concerning at all in terms of Cincinnati this upcoming season?
This season, no, because if he misses time, I'm sure it's just 1-2 games. I think he's starting week 1. I think this is his calf still hurts. They're going to put him on the injury report.
Why'd you say it like that? His calf still hurts.
Because I think it's one of those where he's been getting medical treatment on the calf because that's what he had in training camp or whatever that was, OTAs, where he strained the calf muscle. I'm sure it's still something that is bothering him, but I don't think it's bothering him enough to where they say he's not starting week 1. So I expect Joe Burrow still to be the quarterback when the Bengals take the field on the first Sunday of the NFL season in Cleveland. I think this is kind of as you were saying there, I think this is just gamesmanship by the Cincinnati Bengals. I totally expect Joe Burrow to be playing week 1 against Cleveland.
I will say the one thing that is concerning with this, if the Bengals had a good offensive line, I think it'd be a little bit of a different story. But the fact that they don't have a good offensive line and Burrow's been dealing with this, that's concerning. If he gets hit a few times, early on, I could see where, if he makes that injury a little bit worse, that can be trouble for the Bengals.
Yeah, and you don't need that happening to you right now. Speaking of quarterbacks, Kenny Pickett with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's very coincidental that somebody just texted in and said, can we give the Steelers some love right now? I can't, because I still don't trust Kenny Pickett. Does he take that next step in your guys' eyes? Because I think Kenny Pickett is what Kenny Pickett showed last year. I think Kenny Pickett's an average quarterback. And I don't know if the offensive line and the weapons in Pittsburgh are good enough to make Kenny Pickett any better than what he was last year.
I think he takes the next step. Now, will they make the playoffs? I don't know, because the AFC is just so loaded.
Yeah, I think you know who the playoff teams are in the AFC.
Yeah, so I don't know if they make the playoffs, but I'm actually a big fan of Kenny Pickett. I think he's the franchise guy in Pittsburgh. Now, where he ends up settling in terms of rankings of quarterbacks, the jury's still out. I don't know. It's going to take 3, 4, 5 years before I really know that, because you could be right. He could be an average NFL quarterback, and you can win with those guys. Look at Jared Goff, for example. But
yeah, look at him.
I think he could potentially end up kind of fitting into that right around that top 10 in the NFL in quarterbacks, because he can use his legs. And I thought he was better than I expected in the passing game last year. Now, he's going to have to cut back on turnovers. I think he went 7-9 in terms of touchdown to interceptions. But I do think he takes the next step. I don't know if they're a playoff team still, mostly just because the AFC is so loaded.
Let me ask you guys this. Who has a better season? Kenny Pickett or one of the 3 rookie quarterbacks that were drafted this year in the first round? So Richardson, Young, Stroud, and Young. Who has a better season?
I think Pickett.
I'm with you.
See, I think I would take the field on that, and one of those 3 have a better season.
I look at those teams and I go, Bryce Young might get destroyed because Carolina's offensive line stinks. C.J. Stroud, he can throw a good ball, but who's he throwing to? Look, I drafted his starting tight end not by want, may I add. It was more of, okay, I need another tight end.
Because you were focusing too much on wide receivers.
And then I just don't know what to expect from Anthony Richardson. Maybe he's the guy.
I think their rushing ability showcases their ability to be a better quarterback than Pickett.
But Pickett can run too. I think you're underestimating Pickett's running ability. I think if Richardson is having success this year, it looks kind of like what Fields did in year 1 and 2, where he's not really using the arm, and it's more of, okay, we're going to play ground and pound, and our quarterback's going to be leading the rushing attack.
So let's go over to playoff contenders, which seems odd that we're saying that now, but John Ewing, BetMGM, teams with 50% of bets right now to miss the NFL playoffs. The Buccaneers, the Jets, the Lions, the Bengals, the 49ers. The Buccaneers, by the way, the favorites, minus 5,000.
Yeah, save your money.
Plus 115 on the Jets, plus 145 on the Lions, plus 240 for the Bengals, plus 375 for the 49ers.
I'm a little surprised that 50% of bets, and again, this isn't the sharps that are doing this. It's just your typical, us, betting on this. I'm a little surprised people are taking the Lions to miss the playoffs because of what we said. I think they are the best team in the NFC North. And even if they aren't and they don't win that division, they're good enough to make the playoffs in that NFC field.
I would not be willing to put any money on an NFC team missing the playoffs. These 3 NFC teams, you're right. I think the Lions are the best team in that division. I think the 49ers are the best team in their division. And the Buccaneers, look, I get Buccaneers being the clear favorite on this list, but I can name 6 teams that I'm confident in are making the playoffs this year. And if you look at the NFC South, the Falcons are the clear-cut better team than the Buccaneers, but the Buccaneers still do have a lot of weapons and one of the best offensive lines in the game. I don't know. I would probably lean more towards a Jets team not making the playoffs just because the AFC is so difficult.
That's where I was going to go, is I'd be picking between either the Dolphins or the Jets, and I'd be picking which team between those two that I think won't miss or won't make the playoffs. And I wouldn't be betting against the Jets. I think the Jets are going to make the playoffs this year. So I think if I was going to pick a team, it'd be the Dolphins.
The Jets are the team that are interesting to where I could see where you talk yourself into this plus 115 because it's decent odds to do a bet on them to miss the playoffs. And let's just be honest, if things go south in New York, if they start the year, let's say 1-3, I don't think they're the kind of team that's going to go, let's rally together. Yeah. We're going to turn this around.
I don't think Rodgers is going to be rallying the troops if they underperform. Yeah. I think he's going to do another darkness retreat.
Yeah, and that's why I can see where if it starts slow, and they've got a tough schedule right off the bat, versus the Bills, at the Cowboys, the crappy Patriots, and then they've got the Chiefs at home. So they could lose 3 of the first 4, and I could see where they end up falling apart.
The Jets are a perfect example to me of a team that says we're going to put together a super team of all of these talented players. We've got Rodgers, we got Dalvin Cook, we've got all of these weapons, and then like you just mentioned, T-Bone, you start the season off 0-2 or 1-3, and these guys start to say, oh, well, maybe we're just not that good, and you can't get their mindset back. Whereas all of these other teams, like the Buccaneers being viewed an underdog, I could see them taking advantage of that. The same can be said about the Lions, and we all know the 49ers are going to be a tough team to play against. One more. The question was posed, where was this was on ESPN, T-Bone, asking if somebody this season can break Megatron's single season receiving yards, which was 1,964. The only one that I would say can do it is Justin Jefferson, right? And the only reason I say that is because Jamar Chase, people are going to be talking about. Well, you got a lot of weapons on that one. Miami, you've got Waddle to talk about in that one. Stephon Diggs, maybe, but that's reliant upon Josh Allen being healthy all season long. Like Justin Jefferson, even with having Jordan Addison now to where now they have somebody else to throw to, like Kirk Cousins is going to be throwing to Justin Jefferson in every desperation situation.
Yeah, and I know how this becomes a easy kind of question to ask because there's more games played now that we're playing 17 in the regular season rather than 16 at that time. But no, I don't think anybody will beat it this year. And I actually think, I'm not going to put it in the list of unbreakable records like Cal Ripken's consecutive game streak. It's not there. I think this is going to be really tough to beat and a lot tougher than people think because, like Justin Jefferson, for example, yeah, he had 1,809 receiving yards last year. but his targets didn't diminish a lot, but they did go down once T.J. Hawkinson got traded to Minnesota. Yeah. Hawkinson became one of Kirk Cousins' favorite targets. So now you've got Hawkinson that's still there, just signed a contract extension today, and that you also just added in that rookie in Addison that you just said. Like, there's not a lot of teams that have one legitimate wide receiver anymore with a quarterback that's going to get them the ball. And so the 314 says, what about Cooper Kupp? Stafford
can't connect well with his young players.
Stafford might be on IR by week 3 because that offensive line is going to be terrible. So I don't think Kupp can do it. Chris Olave, I don't know if he'll be able to do that either.
Trust Derek Carr.
So exactly. So I just see that being tough in terms of anybody being able to beat Megatron's record.
You got to find a team that has one guy and the guy that finds his way to get open all the time, which is why Jefferson's the go-to one. But you're right. Now there's more options there. Everybody else on this list, like A.J. Brown, you got to talk about Devontae Smith there and how much they run the ball. And then you got Jalen Hurts' ability to run the ball. It's going to be very tough. I'm with you. I don't know if it's unbreakable just because of how many games are played, but it's going to be very tough for an individual to try and accomplish that.
I was trying to think back on that Lions team that Megatron was on. Who else did they have receiving-wise?
That's a really good question.
That Matt Stafford had to throw to, because I'm thinking back and I really can't think of one player that the Lions had other than Megatron that could catch passes.
Yeah. Chris Durham, Kasim Osgood, Brian Robisky, Mike Thomas.
List of studs.
Yeah, I was going to say their tight end was Will Heller, Brandon Pettigrew, and then the running backs weren't that great either.
Let's be clear. There's a reason this team was 4-12.
Yeah,
and
somebody's got to score or pick up yards.
Is incredible because we just said Megatron had the record at 1964 single season receiving yards. Next closest was some guy by the name of Brandon Pettigrew who had 567 yards.
Oh my God,
that's over double. Actually, it's 3 times as much as that.
Boy, the times in 2012 were bleak in Detroit, but hey, they had the Red Wings, so I guess it was positive. And they had the the Tigers. So
Tigers were good around it. I
was going to say they were good. The Red Wings were still good, so don't worry about the Lions.
How are the Pistons?
Look over here. Tanner Hendricks and Grant Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll hit the rewind next on 101 ESPN. Hey, make sure you put it down on your calendar. September 22nd, Friday night. You could join 101 ESPN and Bud Light for Blues and Brews out at the Anheuser-Busch Brewery. You can get fired up for this blues season with Outdoor Street Party, which features live music from country music star Chris Lane and local blues musician Marquise Knox. Plus, you'll have appearances by blues players. You'll have alumni, food trucks, blues merch, 101 ESPN giveaways, and so much more. Tickets are on sale now, so head over to 101ESPN.com for additional event details and to purchase your tickets for Blues and Brews on September 22nd. That is the night before the first preseason game, so we'll be getting things kicked off over at the Anheuser-Busch Brewery. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, Alex Ferrario with you as we rewind things today on BK and Ferrario, and we'll end it where we started with Jordan Walker and Mason Winn. They're replaying the game right now on Bally Sports Midwest, and 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth for Mason Winn.
I bet he gets a hit.
I bet he gets a hit too. I'll put a lot of money on this if somebody wants to bet me right now. But what I forgot about was his previous at bat when it was 4-3 was he had 2 on and 1 out and he struck out. So for Mason Winn to be in this position with 2 outs at the end of the game, down by 1, the last batter, and to get on base, that's a positive sign for Mason Winn. And then of course Jordan Walker going 4 for 4. These 2 guys give you the ability to see the brightness of a future for a Cardinals team.
Yeah, you got to love what you're seeing from some of the young guys for the St. Louis Cardinals. Walker's doing a really good job. He's been, for the most part, fairly consistent this year. He has had some downs, but he's done a nice job of bouncing back from those, and he's putting up a really solid rookie campaign. I think you're going to see Mason Winn continue to make the adjustments. They're getting ready to show the 0-2 pitch from yesterday, and he does a good job to go down and get the slider that allows for him to get on base, and not only just get on base, he's able to hustle into second base and make it a double, even though they didn't end up needing that because Edman hit a walk-off home run. But that speed's a difference maker, and we've seen his defensive plays already so far. And you've also got Nolan Gorman, who's just in his second year that's been playing well, though he's been dealing with some back issues. So I do like what the future looks like for the offensive pieces for the St. Louis Cardinals. And I mentioned this and just saw the highlight again, I love the energy that Walker and Winn are bringing to the Cardinals right now. I know it's the dog days this summer. They probably have one of those, what are those called? The little paper rings that you put together and you rip one off after each day.
The Advent wreaths or whatever that you put together.
I'm sure they've got one of those for when the season ends.
They might have been putting those together back in April.
Yeah, the energy they've been bringing to the team and the way they've been playing, you got to like it if you're the Cardinals front office, and seeing it from these young guys that are going to be a crucial part, not just next year, but over the next 5 years for the Cardinals.
Frankly, if I'm the Cardinals, that's what I'm evaluating more than anything right now. Players that have that drive when there's nothing to fight for. And I know that seems so weird because, like, how do you judge that? Like, this has got to be the worst time for a lot of these players in the middle of August when everyone else is talking about playoff reigns and you're talking about what your vacation's going to look like. But guys like Walker and Winn, like, they're going to be there. But a game like Tommy Edman has, and we didn't even get to this, we'll get to this tomorrow, but a game like Tommy Edman has, who has not had the greatest of seasons, he's been in and out, he's been injured, his offense has been bad, but he has been finding ways to still be an influential player for this team. Those are the players that, if I'm cycling through who's going to be a part of my roster next year, I'd put a star next to it and say, yeah, he's a guarantee. Because these are the guys you need on your team rather than the ones that don't contribute when things start to look bleak.
Yeah, I think it is important to kind of keep an eye on who, and I'm not saying that anybody's looking like they've given up on the year, but it is important to see guys like this that need to have a surge in the month of September. Yeah. We'll also get to this tomorrow, who needs to have a big month of September for the Cardinals, because I do think when they were really struggling earlier this week, last week, that it looked like there was some complacency where it was, well, I know I've got a job, so I'm just going to kind of go through the motions. To see Tommy Edman, who I think he has a job, but to see him continue to provide a spark to a Cardinals team that is out of it is a nice thing to see. And to the point of that, also showing behind the scenes like what it takes, because you hear Ollie preaching about the preparedness of Tommy Edman, the studious player that he is. You want a guy like that around a bunch of kids that are down there in that locker room. You want Nolan Gorman seeing what Tommy Edman's doing every day. You want a Mason Winn to see what Tommy Edman's doing every day. You want a Jordan Walker to see what he's doing every day and the work that it takes to not just be a big leaguer, but to be here for 5+ years to be a big leaguer. That's the kind of guy you do want in your locker room.
You also wonder if you're able to evaluate that via free agency. And I know we talk a lot about pitchers, but you're going to want guys who have been there, done that, and can give you that ability that otherwise you haven't been able to find. Like the Mike Leaks, like those didn't work out, but you really never were in that position in terms of Mike Leak was the guy that you went to in bad situations. You're looking at that. That's why Aaron Nola, I think, is so intriguing to me, because no matter what, he's going to be there for your team. That's how it feels like when it comes to via free agency, you're going to be evaluating this talent that you're bringing in. Guys who have been there, done that, guys who have been through the struggles but still found ways to be competitive in that realm. You don't have a lot of that on your team on the pitching side, and now is when I think you need to reset that identity for your pitchers.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I don't know if they have a guy for that for the pitching side of things.
I mean, you haven't had that. I mean, think about what your rotation was at the start. Other than Waino, you had Waino, but the Flahertys, the Michaelises, the Steven Matzes, like these guys have just been a part of it.
Michaelis is probably that guy right now that is kind of the leader for this rotation. But to your point, I mean, there are starting a lot of young guys, so I can understand where the difference is right now. So that makes sense.
You got that in the bullpen also. So those will all be areas that we'll be discussing. But yeah, we'll get into that a little bit tomorrow with Tommy Edman and others. If you missed anything from the show today, you can check it out up on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The podcast presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. For Grant Francis, Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Fastlane is coming up next until 6 o'clock on 101 ESPN.